Government Center. This is the Santa Barbara County Planning Commission. Would you please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, Ms. Mendoza, could we have the TV coverage announcement, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Planning Commission hearings are televised live on County of Santa Barbara Television, Channel 20, at 9 a.m. in the South Coast, Lompoc, San Ynez Valley, Santa Maria, and Orchid areas. We broadcast the Planning Commission hearings on Fridays at 5 p.m. on CSB-TV Channel 20. For the roll call, Commissioner Boyson.
Here.
Commissioner Brown.
Here.
Commissioner Cooney.
Here.
Commissioner Valencia.
Here.
For the record, Commissioner Smizer is absent today.
All right, thank you very much. Could we have the agenda status report, Ms. Black?
Mr. Chair, thank you, and good morning. Your agenda is ready to proceed as is indicated on the agenda. Item number 1 is going to be continued at your commission's concurrence to October 11th. And item number 2, we're actually requesting that item be dropped from the agenda. I think we've decided to pursue settlement of some legal issues in a different manner, and so the government code consistency won't be required. Items 3, 4, and 5 are ready to move forward today. There's a revised recommendation on item number 4 that we'll go over with the commission, but I think we've come to a place where we can recommend approval of phase 1, and so we're pleased with that, and we'll report on that when we get to the item.
All right, could you move on to the projection report?
Yes. Mr. Chair, your next meeting is 2 weeks from today in Santa Barbara on September 6th. That agenda is closed, and I have scheduled the Gaviota Coast projects briefing for that day. So I know that's something your commission wanted to see. We will be going over all of the projects and their status on the Gaviota Coast and providing a little bit more detail on the Santa Barbara Ranch project. I know that the commission's quite interested in how that's proceeding. You also have a special hearing the next day on September 7th with the Montecito Planning Commission. That's to consider and hopefully be ready to make a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors on the zoning ordinance reformatting project. If either commission isn't prepared to make a recommendation on the 7th, then I believe we were proposing to have another joint meeting on September 20th when the Montecito Planning Commission normally meets. So you may want to reserve that date just in case, but like I said, I'm hopeful we'll be ready to move forward on September 7th. Then you'll be meeting again on September 13th. That's a Santa Maria hearing, and it is closed. There is one item on the agenda that might provide for a little bit of room if need be, that will be dropped and moved to another date, and that's the zoning violation ordinance amendments. We have some issues that we need to work through with county council, and we'll be putting that back on the projection report. You'll see when that'll be on at your September 6th meeting. Then we have another special hearing, so you're going to have a busy September. On Tuesday, September 19th, that meeting is also in Santa Maria. That's the week that you typically don't meet. The board's not meeting that date, so we're taking advantage of the availability of this room and trying to get some items caught up, because as you can see, there are a number of items, particularly in Santa Maria, that need your attention. And then back to Santa Barbara on the 27th of September. You'll note on going back to September 19th, the other briefing that the commission had requested from Environmental Health Services is scheduled for that day. Right. And I believe that's going to move forward. Aside from that, your hearings just continue, on into October, and your October 11th Santa Maria meeting is already closed, assuming that those items all move forward. So you can see you're pretty busy over the next couple of months.
All right, thank you very much. Any questions? Yes, Commissioner Boyson.
Mr. Chair, Ms. Meester, I received a reminder in the mail for this public officials ethics training, for September 30th. I thought that this was going to be available over the internet, that we could do that. Did I misunderstand that?
Mr. Chair, I don't know if Mr. Allen has any information on that. We can check on it and we'll let you know.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. And with that, we'll move on to the public comment area. This is a time where we hear comments from folks who have something to say that's anything that's not on today's agenda. And from Santa Barbara, we have remote testimony from Mr. John Thorndike. Mr. Thorndike?
Good morning. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, we sure can.
I'm John Thorndike from Toro Canyon, and I am here, as I say, for one zoning per parcel. That's what I'm here for. When I, at Celeste Coburl, one of my neighbors' suggestion, tried to level an area to park a small vehicle just inside of my 224-foot entryway, a stop was put on my doing so because of hand grading. Hand grading. Rake and hoe, hand grading. It is still on the parcel, even though I enter at my ag zoned area. 224 feet entryway. Why? Mature avocado trees on that, and I can't put a car in there. At this minute, I'm losing avocados from my trees at an awesome rate. At this minute. At this minute. What do you intend doing about the situation? Isn't it unfair?
We can't answer your questions here, but we'll certainly take your comments, Mr. Thorndike, and look into it.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Anybody else? Do we have any other? All right, thank you very much. And with that, we'll go on to Planning Commissioner's informational reports. Does anybody have anything? I have an item concerning housing. From time to time, the federal government closes military installations. They've closed El Toro, they closed Fort Ord, and they closed Camarillo Air Force Station. And what happens is the community comes in and takes over and puts community projects in there, and it's good for the economy. Well, at Vandenberg, there was an announcement sometime back that the housing outside the gate was going to be converted, and they were going to take all those folks into the base, and that housing was going to be torn down. That's Cape Heart housing, I believe, that was built back about 30-some years ago. They said, well, it's obsolete now. But, you know, I lived in a house that was 35 years old. I don't know how it's obsolete. And I think that there can be better use than tearing down those houses. There must be at least a couple of hundred houses there. There's a junior high and there's an elementary school by very close. And I would think that the housing authority, Santa Barbara Housing Authority, self-help, and our particular affordable housing czar would look into it, and perhaps the Board of Supervisors, and there could be some kind of a jumpstart housing there for use by police, fire, agriculture, by somebody, teachers, people getting started. It just seems a shame to tear down all that housing, and it's outside the gate, so it wouldn't be a problem for Vandenberg, you know, for security purposes. And I think that somehow or another we need to look into that at a time when we're trying to meet a SB 1866 requirement of 17,500 and some houses by 2008, and we're having difficulty meeting that. Those several hundred homes certainly could help us achieve that level. And I'm just curious if there has been any thought about this in the county. Ms. Black?
Mr. Chair, thank you. I think that's a really good comment. I do remember probably a year or two ago speaking with Supervisor Gray about this issue as well. And she was checking with the base and looking into the issue. But we'll forward this on to comp planning.
Mr. Cortez, perhaps?
And to Mr. Cortez, who's overseeing housing and community development right now.
I know you can't
See
do
what we
something
might be
right
able to
away, but
do.
I think some preliminary meetings with the base and discussion of what something could be done. Just running bulldozers over all those units would seem like a sacrilege.
Right.
Okay.
I think it's a good comment.
All right, thank you. And then I have a second item. From time to time, when we approve projects, during the meeting and the discourse of the discussion, we talk about some requirements that the commissioners have for units. And later on, when the plan comes through, we approve it and it all goes. We never indicate that it should be put as a condition of approval. And as a result, sometimes when the plans come in, those things are not incorporated into the plan. And there are some tracks that have been built that don't have the requirements that were discussed by the commission. And I'm wondering is, during these meetings, do we have to actually say we need that as a condition of approval and we have to have a vote on it? Or is it obvious when we say we think that should have such and such and the planner should incorporate that? What is the legal documentation that should occur? Ms. Meester.
Mr. Chair, and perhaps council wants to comment on this as well. If it's an item that modifies the project description or includes a different condition than is specified in the conditions of approval or the findings, then it should be incorporated to make sure that the applicant is aware of it and that the planners make sure that your requirements are implemented. So I know sometimes in hearings the commission will ask an applicant, well, did you intend to do X? And they'll say, oh yeah, we did. Well, if their conditions in their approval don't reflect that, I don't think we can hold them to it in the long term. So it's something we just need to be mindful about, I think, as we go through the hearings.
Okay, and I would like to make sure that from now on, either the supervisory planner or the planners says, when we request something, that needs to be put in as a condition of approval. And do we need to vote on it, Mr. Allen?
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, if it is a change to the project conditions, then it should be very clear that it is the consensus of the Commission that condition be revised or that a new condition be added, and that would require a vote. And as you make your motions, you should make it clear that you are accepting a condition proposed by another commissioner, or that your motion includes a condition that, as the motion maker, you wish to have revised or added.
All right, thank you. And then as a third item, there's a track that we approved, Rice Ranch, and initially that track is going to have about 700 units. There are going to be 5 distinct tracks in it. In the entry track, the first track, they had asked that some of the lots be at about 6,000 square feet. Well, I received a notification, a Board of Supervisors letter that indicates some of those lots will be around 5,000 square feet. And the letter says that some of the lots are going to be made larger, but it does not say that they're going to be made smaller. And the lots, when you look at the write-up, are being made smaller. So I have a little problem with that, and I think, is that decision being made at the deputy director level, or should it come back to the Planning Commission? Ms. Black?
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, I'll have to look into that, and
All right.
I'll be meeting with the planners this afternoon to speak to them about some other issues on Rice Ranch, so I'll have to get back to you.
All right, thank you. All right, and anybody, Commissioner Boyson?
No, just to follow on your comments on the second item as far as placing the conditions, I think, I really do think that is important. I think Mr. Allen brings up a very good point here. Especially in this day and age of where the project is going to probably be sold at least once between the time it gets approved by the Planning Commission and actually built. I know that we're getting challenged now on certain conditions from projects where, for instance, it required that they have masonry walls, and now the new applicants that were not part of the project are coming back and saying, well, nobody else in the neighborhood has masonry walls. Why do we have to? And we're having to support our so if we just had that as a recommendation or a landscape plan or something, I think we'd be dead. So I think it's a very good point that we really do need to tighten these things down as conditions of approval. And yeah, thank you.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Boyson. All right, and with that, we'll move on to Planning and Development Divisional briefings. Ms. Black, do we have anything? Ms. Black, you'll have to excuse me from time to time. I'm going to call you Ms. Meester, and I'll takes a little getting used to it.
From time to time, I call myself Miss Meester too, so it takes me a little bit of getting used to. So we'll all forgive each other.
All right.
Mr. Chair, I don't have anything specific this morning to brief you on, except for one item, just to let you know that your action on the land trust project at Arroyo Hondo has been appealed to the Board of Supervisors. As you know, I think there is some time constraint in getting that project constructed. The applicant is appealing the conditions related to the mitigation ratio, to the limits on construction, and on the reporting requirements that reports be provided every 6 months instead of every year, or once a year like the other resource agencies are requiring. We are going to get that to the Board of Supervisors on September 12th to set it for hearing. And I don't know if it'll be set for hearing for the 26th, which is a Santa Maria, no it isn't, it's a Santa Barbara hearing, or if it'll be the first meeting in October. But we are trying to get that to the board quickly, and just wanted you to know that that was occurring.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Black, any word on the date for the Christmas tree farm appeal before the board?
I have not seen a set hearing on that. Did you see one while I was gone?
Okay.
So I don't have a date. The board's not been in session very frequently. That doesn't mean it has prevented this, but I think there's some negotiations and facilitation going on. And perhaps, I think Mr. Baker's in Santa Barbara. He may have a better idea of when that might come up.
All right, thank you very much. Yes, Commissioner Bush.
Commission, there has not been a date set yet.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Baker. All right, and we'll go on to the minutes. You received the minutes of August 2nd and August 9th.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of August 2nd.
Thank you.
I'll second the motion, Mr.
Thank you.
Chair.
Could we have roll call, please?
Commissioner Boyson?
Aye.
Commissioner Brown?
Aye.
Commissioner Cooney?
Aye.
Commissioner Valencia?
Aye.
Vote carries 4-0.
All right, and the August 9th, Commissioner Cooney?
I will move approval with some suggested changes, Mr. Chair. This brings up the issue we've just discussed regarding conditions, and one of the opportunities we have to actually see put into the record suggestions we make during the course of a hearing occurred on the Live Oak Shale matter, where several changes were suggested. And I was just a little confused, and I think the applicant and public might be as well, by the condition 28, which is outlined on page 6 of our minutes. There is a reference to a 7-year review period, saying that the county shall conduct a comprehensive review of project conditions and consider adding reasonable conditions which incorporate mitigation measures 7 years after permit issuance and every 7 years thereafter, which suggests to me that every 7 years this is going to come through a review cycle. The next sentence says a comprehensive review of conditions that are not effectively mitigating impacts may be, the word should be conducted at any appropriate time. So my recollection on this isn't perfect, but if the meaning of the commission was that in addition to the every 7-year review cycle, if something comes up that's creating a significant problem, the matter could also be brought back for a review of conditions, then I would suggest adding this at the beginning of that sentence. In addition to the regular review of project conditions, and then begin the sentence, a comprehensive review. So it's quite clear to everyone that we have a dual level of review possibilities, regular and then special if merited. And then just to add one final comment, again, condition 1 on the following page, page 7, time frame to complete reclamation. The second sentence says the county would monitor the success. I think Mr. Allen would agree that the appropriate condition language should be the county shall monitor the success of reclamation over at least a 5-year period.
Wood to shell.
wood to shell. And then finally, Mr. Chair, I have a question, just a question with regard to condition 70 on page 9 with regard to the Arroyo Hondo steelhead passage. We've just learned this matter is appealed, so I think to clarify the record, our minutes should be clear. The underlying language which was added says regular pre-scheduled meetings scheduled no more than 2 weeks apart shall occur between the permit compliance officer, the land trust representative, and the general contractor. And my question is, over what period of time do those regular 2-week meetings occur? It wasn't clear from this condition, and I thought it should be. Do they start right away? When does the project start? That kind of thing.
All right, thank you. Ms. Meester?
Mr. Chair, I think, and Commissioner Cooney, I actually watched the tape on this item because of the appeal and some issues that came up, and my impression was that this was to occur during construction. So I think if we just inserted during construction, regular pre-scheduled meetings shall occur, would be a good clarification.
That would be my suggestion then, and with those changes, as I say, I move approval.
Commissioner Brown?
Mr. Chair, I just have one small change on item number 3. The project name is Live Oak Shale Quarry. You left out the word quarry.
Oh, okay, very good. All right, and with that, could we have a motion for approval?
I made the motion, Mr.
Oh, all
Chair.
right, I'll second. Thank you. Ms. Mendoza, would you call the roll?
Commissioner Boyson?
Aye.
Commissioner Brown?
Aye.
Commissioner Cooney?
Aye.
Commissioner Valencia?
Aye.
Vote carries 4-0.
All right, and now we'll move on to the Director's Report and Board of Supervisors hearing summary. Mr. Baker from Remote Testimony in Santa Barbara. Are you there, Mr. Baker?
Mr. Chair and members of the Commission, this will be very brief because, as you know, the Board of Supervisors did not meet this week and actually will not meet again until September 12th. Just to let you know that I am working on finally assessing how we're going to replace Steve Chase in Development Review South. It's going to necessarily be an interim position for someone because we won't have time to do a recruitment in that kind of a period of time. So we'll have somebody in there on an interim basis beginning September 5th, day after Labor Day. And lastly is that I'm going to be working with the chair of the commission on our agendas to see if there's anything we can do to, again, help you with your decision making. And that's a process that he and I have agreed we're going to work on together so that we can not have you there till 6 o'clock at night on some of those days, hopefully. And that's it for today.
Thank you very much, Mr. Baker. And Mr. Baker, I want to tell you that that heads up that you gave me Monday, you called me. That's the first time a director has ever called me at home, and I appreciate that very much. Hearing all the items and going through, it's a positive step forward to having a better communication with your department. Thank you very much. All right, and with that, we'll take a short break to set up for the first item. Please take your seats. Our first item on the standard agenda is the Capone appeal of the Gabbert new driveway. Ms. Mendoza, could you read that into the record, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The following is the hearing on the request of Peter Capone, appellant, to consider the appeal 04 APL 7. Appeal fell on March 24, 2004 of the Planning and Development Department's decision to approve a coastal development permit 03 CDP 48.
All right. Tina Ryder is not here, but this is something that we're going to continue. This is a first district item. Commissioner Cooney?
Mr. Chair, I'll move for approval of staff's recommendation to continue the matter to the calendar of October 11, 2006.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Brown. Ms. Mendoza, would you call the record?
Commissioner Boyson?
You know, before we, is it October 11 or October 4?
October 4th.
Mr. Chair, it shows as October 4th in both the memo from staff and in the projection report. Perhaps it said the 11th on the agenda.
On the agenda, it's 11.
Did it? I don't know.
Which is it?
It does say October 11th on the agenda, but I believe it should be the 4th.
Okay.
Yes, staff is available by remote testimony, and we did look at October 4th as the continuance date.
All right, thank you. So let's proceed. Ms. Mendoza, call the roll.
Commissioner Boyson?
With the understanding, it's, the motion is amended to October 4th, aye.
Yes, I'm sure.
That's correct. Commissioner Brown?
Aye.
Commissioner Cooney? Aye. Commissioner Valencia?
Aye.
Vote carries 4-0.
All right. Thank you, Commissioner Boyson. Item number 2, sale of Cary Place consistency determination. Mrs. Mendoza?
The following is the hearing on the request of Ron Carlentine, County of Santa Barbara General Services, to consider case number 06-GOV-20, application filed on May 24, 2006, for a determination that the sale of an unused and unimproved right-of-way known as Cary Place is consistent with the comprehensive plan, local coastal plan of the County of Santa Barbara pursuant to Government Code Section 65402.
Thank you. Any site visits or ex parte? All right, first district item, Commissioner Cooney.
I would move to approve staff's recommendation that this matter be dropped from the standard agenda.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Brown. Ms. Mendoza, call the roll.
Commissioner Boyson?
Aye.
Commissioner Brown?
Aye.
Commissioner Cooney?
Aye.
Commissioner Valencia?
Aye.
Vote carries 4-0.
All right, and we'll start with our first meeting today, our first item. Orchid Quayside 30 General Plan Amendment and a Rezone. Ms. Mendoza, could you read that into the record?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The following is the hearing on the request of Urban Planning Concepts, agent for the applicant Bradley Orchid Ventures, to consider acceptance and initiation of a general plan amendment and rezone 05 GPA 10 and 05 GPA 6 of a general applications filed on November 1st, 2005.
All right, thank you very much. Do we have any site visits or ex parte? Commissioner Boyson.
I had a brief phone conversation with Ms. Hunt.
All right. Commissioner Cooney.
I have still had no ex parte communications. I did revisit the site.
Thank you. And Commissioner Brown.
Thank you. I have previously visited the site, and I spoke with Ms. Tamura.
All right, thank you. And I have spoken with Ms. Tamura and Ms. Hunter intermittently throughout the project. And with that, let's go on to...
Mr. Chair, if I
yes.
could, as well, I have had numerous conversations with numerous neighbors in the area. I probably wouldn't remember all their names, so I won't try.
All right, thank you very much. And with that, we'll go on. Mr. Pell, would you like to... Mr. Baum.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, good morning. Thank you. This is the hearing on a potential rezone for Orchid Quayside 30. The project site's located west of Bradley Road and south of Woodmere Road in the 4th Supervisorial District. Staff will give you a brief background on how we got to this point today. This is the 4th hearing on this project, and briefly summarize the current proposal that P&D is supporting, and then turn it over to the applicant for their presentation. We also have in the audience today Dave Madsen and Barbara Walker on hand. They are the county's housing element project managers, and they'll be available to assist the commission on questions concerning the status of the housing element process and how this fits into their effort. So just briefly, as mentioned, the project site is known as Quayside 30 within the Orchid Community Plan area. It's currently vacant. It's a 79-acre parcel and is zoned Ag 140 agriculture, 40-acre minimum parcel size. Project site also has a land use designation of A1 agriculture. The parcel was formerly owned by Unical, contains a capped oil well, and the parcel is currently used for light cattle grazing. This is a vicinity aerial of the project site. This is the project site outlined in white here. Bradley Road, Broadway, Union Valley Parkway, and Highway 101. And then this red dashed area is the flight approach zone. This is a close-up of the project site. Bradley Road along here, along the east, Woodmere Road, Amethyst, and then Hummel Road is off the picture here on the west. Union Valley Parkway is a little ways up here on the north. As mentioned in previous Planning Commission hearings, there are several major issue areas and constraints to development on this site that staff has identified. Just briefly, they are the flight approach overlay with a corresponding 1,500-foot wide no-build corridor. This means that no structures may be developed within this corridor. It also restricts the uses to non-residential uses such as roads and parks and parking lots. It also has an open space overlay that fits within this no-build corridor, further restricts the types of allowed uses. The site contains sensitive dune scrub habitat according to the Orchid Community Plan. The plan contains policies prohibiting uses or development within these sensitive habitat areas and requires that allowed recreational uses be cited to avoid removal of the dune scrub habitat. And finally, being a discretionary project in the Orchid Community Plan area, the project would need to comply with Policy 102, which requires that projects provide what's known as supplemental water and not increase groundwater extractions. So this is a figure from Key Site 30 from within the Orchid Community Plan. This yellow shaded area is the no-build corridor, as indicated in the plan. This green area is the open space area that fits wholly within that no-build corridor. And then these blue areas are the areas identified as dune scrub habitat. As you can see, there are several constraints to development on the site, which could significantly restrict the amount of area available for development. The previous 3 Planning Commission hearings on the project, neighborhood concerns raised by the public included the proposed density of development. Some felt that the proposed multifamily density of development was too high and not consistent with vicinity development. The intensity of use of the site was also an issue with respect to the then proposed soccer complex of up to 12 soccer fields. The increase in traffic that would be associated with the project and generated on surrounding roadways was also an issue. Encroachment into the airport approach zone, and then also the loss of open space. The Commission's direction at the previous hearing was for the applicant to return with a proposal that includes less dense residential development on the perimeter or the edges of the project site, perhaps increasing in density in the interior to reduce the number of proposed soccer fields. It was determined that the soccer complex was designed more as a regional soccer center versus the neighborhood soccer fields. The Commission also asked for more details concerning the project beyond just simple zoning designations. And finally, the Commission urged greater consistency with the Orchid Community Plan and its development standards. The applicant then took this into consideration and returned with the current proposal. The soccer field component has been eliminated altogether. The soccer federation that was prepared to fund and construct and maintain the previous soccer fields needed a certain level of use of the site to make it make the project make sense for them. Reduction to 3 or 4 fields really wouldn't be adequate for their purposes, so that's no longer on the table. The proposal is now purely a residential one. There's still no commercial or professional and institutional uses that were proposed in one of the earlier options. There is the main access point would be here, directly across from Village Drive on Bradley. That would be the main intersection. There'd be a secondary access here on Bradley, just slightly south of that intersection. And then access over here in the southwest corner would be provided via an extension of Cherry Lane. Now, these areas shaded in pink are the 7R1 proposed zoning areas. There's 41 lots in this area, and the minimum lot size are 7,000 square feet. The blue shaded area in the southwest here is an area of 8R1 zoning with a minimum lot size of 8,000 square feet. There's 31 of those lots. This area here along the southeast is an area of 10R1 zoning with 11 of those proposed lots, 10,000 square foot minimum size. And then the area shaded in purple here is the area proposed with a DR20 zoning. As shown, there would be 33 six-plex units in here. This would result in approximately 198 units. The zoning is consistent with the zoning needed to comply with the state requirement for affordable housing. And then finally, the remainder of the site, the green area would be remain with the Ag 140 zoning, it's approximately 50 acres. As I mentioned before, there are still constraints on the site, mainly the dune scrub habitat and the flight overlay. As you can see, the flight approach no-build zone is intact. You can see here that there are no structural development proposed in that area. These green blobs indicate where the Orchid Community Plan indicates that there's dune scrub habitat. It's unclear at this point if the habitat is still intact. The site has been grazed for the last 10 years. The extent and quality of this habitat's in question, but those are things that would be determined during the environmental review stage of application processing. And then finally, the Orchid Community Plan envisioned a walking trail somehow making its way through the site, which could potentially be accommodated as well. So just to summarize staff's preliminary analysis on this project, the current proposal does include lower residential densities on the perimeter lots, as the commission asked for. It does leave the area designated as open space intact, not proposing any structural development. The project includes a higher density in the interior with the DR20 zoning that could go towards meeting the county's need for affordable housing and complying with state mandates. As we know, this site's already one of the sites being considered by the housing element. A little more detail still needed as to exactly what type of multifamily housing, neighborhood amenities, infrastructure. However, the level of detail provided could be sufficient for initiation purposes, which is what we are here for today. The proposal is closer to being consistent with the Orchid Community Plan policies than the previous proposals that we've seen. As mentioned, there are still some policy and environmental concerns to work out. However, I'd like to remind everyone that any type of development on this site beyond just a single-family residence and agricultural structures is going to require a general plan amendment and a rezone. Okay, these are some examples of residential units that could be built at densities of 16 units or greater per acre that could possibly be in the DR20 zoned area. These examples were provided by our housing element team. These units here are 17.2 units per acre. We've got 17.8 units per acre on this one. 20 units per acre with this type of development. 19 units on this one per acre. 20 units per acre. And then finally, 16 units per acre. So that just kind of gives you a flavor of what potentially could be developed in that the higher density area. Staff's received several contacts from neighbors and members of the public concerning the proposal. We received several letters from the public, and we've included those in the commissioners' packets as they were received after the normal docketing deadline for the staff report. So it's therefore staff's recommendation that the commission's action include the following motions. I'd like to point out that we're changing slightly the recommendation. The way the recommendation reads in the memo, it appears as if the project is for, the recommendation is for approval of the project. That's incorrect. It's actually to initiate the general plan amendment and rezone. As we just mentioned, we haven't reviewed the environmental effects of the project, obviously, and a thorough policy analysis has also not been done. So the recommendation is to initiate the general plan and rezone that's proposed, noting that the proposal complies with the county's 2003 to 2008 revised housing element, and to reaffirm the Commission's commitment to a policy direction aligned with the continued implementation of the county's adopted 2003 to 2008 revised housing element. And just a final note, given that the notice of preparation for the housing element EIR is completed and under final review internally, it's staff's recommendation that a separate EIR not be prepared for this project, and that the project rather the applicant be allowed to fund the portions of the project not covered by the housing element EIR as alternatives to the housing element EIR. versus concurrently 2 EIRs going on at the same time. It's actually, the housing element EIR has moved faster. They're about to put out the notice of preparation for consultants and for the state agencies to begin the EIR process. And that concludes staff presentation.
Mr. Baumann, how would when an EIR is site-specific and not requiring an EIR for this site, how would the housing element, would that look at this site-specific and give the environmental concerns review there?
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, the housing element EIR would look at the housing aspect of this site, the affordable housing component, and what we're recommending is that we allow the applicant to fund the other portions of the project as alternatives in that EIR, which are required as part of an EIR in the first place.
All right. And then my last question would be to do with Water 2. There's a request for some water from Santa Maria, and are you familiar with the requirement?
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, yes. The applicant provided this morning a letter from the City of Santa Maria Utilities Department that basically reads, the City Council Resolutions 2003-150 and 2004-137 authorize the sale of up to 900 acre-feet of supplemental water to Orchid community property owners. The city would entertain the opportunity to enter into a supplemental water sales agreement with the Bradley Orchid Limited Liability Corporation to provide water resources for your proposed residential development. And then it goes on to say, when you are ready to pursue the needed water resources, please contact the Utilities Department. That was just submitted this morning.
All right, thank you. Any questions by the commission? All right, if not, will the applicant like to come forward?
Thank you. Chairman Valencia, Commissioners. My name is Lanae Hunter. I reside at 124 East Camino Colegio in the city of Santa Maria. I am the managing member for Bradley Orchid Ventures. And I'm quite pleased today because I think we've certainly come a long way from where we started. I know I have, and you probably feel the same. I've tried very hard to listen to the concerns of the neighbors, to address those in my new plan, and also to listen to the concerns of the commission and help also be a partner with the county on their housing element. So I ask you today to let me go to the next step, which is just the processing, where I will begin to, spend the money for all the reports that are necessary and hope to be back before you at the appropriate time for final approval. With that, I'd like to introduce the land consultant on this project, Lori Tamura with Urban Planning Concepts.
Mr. Moore?
Good morning, Lori Tamura with Urban Planning Concepts, and pleased to be before you today in regards to initiating this process, being tied to the work that we've done with the housing element group and moving this project forward through this process. I think what we'd like to do, just to bring this down to the numbers that are of concern to the community and also for the housing group. The revised project, and Adam, if you could put the one that had all your color coding on it. Initially, when we left the Planning Commission the last time, we took away the idea of doing the perimeter lots around the project here, matching as much as possible the adjacent lots to the south and smaller lots to the north, but comparable to the ones that are on Woodmere. And then we internalized the higher density component. Our initial proposal was for DR 12.3 in this location, which if we totaled all of the numbers together at a DR 12.3 designation, the total number of units would be 206 potential units. As we move up into the DR 20 designation, which was what the housing group and the planning department requested that we at least go through the process, processing it, with the idea of the lowest level being 16 units per acre, the number would now be 281 units total, leaving the single-family components out there. So For the purpose of today, we're looking at a range of somewhere between 206 units at sort of the lower end of the numbers to potentially a higher end of around 280, maybe 290 units, depending on how the design of the project comes forward. That is substantially less than what the initial initiation was for Keysite 30 during the housing element hearings, which had somewhere between 350 and 500 units. So I think that is an important element to relay to the community. And also, this is not 100% affordable, as may have been indicated through other communications with the community. The single-family component will be market rate sales. The DR20 or multifamily component will have a range of sales prices, but some will be market, some will be obviously committed to the affordable housing program. So I think we need to put it into context as to what the design and the proposal is, and incorporating the concerns that the community had. Currently, we are showing the approximately 50-acre area as passive designated open space, and alternative uses for that site for the community or for other projects will be dealt with as we move through the process. So I'm here today to answer any questions. I know Lene is here, and we look forward to working with the county staff, the consultants, and coming back hopefully middle of next year with the EIR. And I think the question that Commissioner Valencia had is, this is the idea of doing a mini EIR within the context of the housing element EIR is comparable to what was done previously with the Orchid Community Plan, where certain key sites were analyzed in more detail. And we will do a lot more work on this project once the initiation is completed and Lene's ready to spend more money on the project.
Thank you.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Mora, just to clarify something, when people hear affordable, they always want to back up, and many of them don't understand what it is. In this particular case, just talking about the R1 housing, you have 83 units. Affordable units in there would be 5% for very low, which would amount to about 4 houses, and 4 houses for 5% for low. Is that correct?
Actually, Commissioner Valencia, Chair, our intent now as planning this as a unit, as a total, is that we would sell the single family would be in just market rate. The affordable components would be moved into the DR portion.
But that's the obligation of the project.
The whole project.
To bring them in.
Correct.
Yes. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Any questions, Commissioner Boyson?
Yeah, Mr. Mora, looking at this, obviously you haven't had a lot of time to put this together. I'm sure I'm assuming these are conceptual ideas. My question: have you talked to our traffic or had any traffic engineers look at this and gotten their input?
No, we have not moved into any of the technical review of the project. The Orchid Community Plan did look at the one access point at this location, because that is a 4-way intersection right there with Village Drive on the other side. And I don't know if you have the aerial photograph, you could flip that up. And then what we did was also tack in or add in a mid-block between the Village Drive intersection and the Amethyst, a mid-block provision. So here is Village Drive coming out right here, and that's where our first intersection is. And then we have a mid-block one exactly between Village and Amethyst, another driveway or street intersection. Keep in mind that there will be a signalized intersection at Union Valley Parkway and Bradley Road as Union Valley Parkway is extended. And currently we are doing an signal plan for Patterson and Bradley also. So there'll be some timing issues with traffic that currently don't exist very well because we don't have some mid-block signalization happening.
The signalization at Patterson and Bradley is completely separate of this project.
Correct. That's tied to other projects.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. And Ms. Tamura, after everybody gets a chance to testify, you will get a chance for rebuttal on the items that have been testified on.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. And our first speaker will be Councilman Leo Trujillo.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning Commission. My name is Leo Trujillo. I'm a city councilman in Santa Maria. I'm also the chairman of the board of the Central Coast Water Authority. and I support this Orchid project. I think as a group, we need to think regionally, and I think this is a good project. The developer has gone through a lot of things, and I believe that she's on the right track. I also believe that Lene Hunter can obtain the supplemental water that she needs for this project, so I urge you to support this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Trujillo. Reverend Ed Jalbert, followed by Sandy Piper.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Father Ed Jalbert from St. Joseph High School. St. Joseph High School is a neighbor of this project. We've been there for over 40 years. 300 of our 500 families are in that area, and so it's a matter of concern to us. And we want to speak on behalf of the project. We have watched since the 1960s the expansion of the area, the development and housing, and we find it a wonderful place for families to live, and we feel this is a beautiful component. It's a mixture of housing, some with entry level, which would allow young families to enter into the market, which is difficult to get into, and would help sustain the family character of the Orcutt area. We had also been in favor of some kind of recreational, organized, or passive for youth. We see that it's, at this point, completely passive. We'd still like to speak on behalf of at least considering something that would offer some more, some kind of fields, maybe smaller fields, but that's a matter for you to determine in subsequent studies. We appreciate the dialogue that has taken place, and that Ms. Hunter has been open to various suggestions, both from neighbors and from community organizations. And so we would ask you to move to the next step, to enter this into an initial kind of study so that we can continue that dialogue, and we think it'll be a beautiful project when it's done.
Thank you very much. Sandy Piper, followed by Tim Hollyfield.
Good morning. My name's Sandy Piper, and I live at 980 Woodmere. I've owned a home there for 19 years, and I'm still opposed to this project with the concerns of the traffic. I'd like to see the environmental impact report done before we okay this. There's a lot of issues with Bradley Road right now. There's so much traffic. I get out on Woodmere. Amethyst has worse problem. Putting all of these, the multifamily homes in the middle, that will be just dumping out a lot of traffic right onto Bradley. They wouldn't have any other access onto another road. They'd have to go out onto Bradley, which is very, very busy at the school times. There's Rigetti and St. Joe. Try to get out of either of those streets in the morning right now when school starts, and in the afternoon, it's a tremendous amount of traffic on there. Maybe signals would help, maybe they wouldn't. I think it was brought up about, has anyone talked to anybody on the traffic issues, and that might be somewhere to start rather than going ahead and saying, yeah, okay, let's rezone at this time and think of these things afterwards. These things should be thought of first. And there's so many other houses over the Rice Ranch Road project, Stubblefield, Stillwell. All of those are going to have impact on the shopping at the intersection of Clark and Bradley. Try to go to Mid-State Bank right now, try to park at Albertsons. That's the only grocery store. I mean, this is just a lot of houses in this area, just boom, 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 boom. You know, I think we need to take time to think about it, keep the open space for a while, let the other projects come to more completion and see how the impact is going to be on the roads, the intersections, everything involved. So I'm still opposed to the rezone at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Tim Holyfield, followed by Ron Bettendorf Court.
Good morning. My name is Tim Holyfield. I live at 980 Woodmere Road. I'm still opposed to this project, although we've come quite a ways from where we were before, but I don't think we would be here if it wasn't for the housing mandate to begin with. The Orchid Community Plan laid this out as an open space to begin with. I think just because it's an open space doesn't mean we have to build on it. And sometimes progress is measured in what we don't do and not what we, want to do for financial gain or community so-called support or whatever. So I'm against this project right now. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ron Betancourt, followed by Frank Watson.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners. My name is Ron Betancourt. I'm president of the Orchid Area Advisory Group. We do not support the general plan amendment or rezone of this area. I've brought this up before. Even though Key Site 30 has been named out of 10 other sites as being a possible site to be picked for affordable housing, it has not been identified as a site actually to be for affordable housing at this time yet. I know Mrs. Hunter is trying to move her project along and get an investment on it, make her money and so forth, but I think we need to stop and look a little bit. You need to get that EIR out. You need to find out. You need to do that traffic study. You need to listen to the residents that live within the community of Key Site 30 and what they have to say and the concerns. They live there now. They know what goes on right now at this particular time. They see the traffic on a day-by-day basis. They see what everything that they have to go along with to survive in that. If you sit there and increase this area here, you got to look at it's going to be a lot more hectic than what it is right now. So I think we need to stop, think about it, get that EIR out, get that traffic study done, and listen to the residents that live within this particular area, so we know what was going on before we go any further with this project. Thank you.
Thank you. Frank Watson, followed by Leroy Cadena.
My name is Frank Watson. I live at the corner of Amethyst and Bradley, and I think we ought to rename Bradley to Bradley Freeway. You know, all the homes that they're building here, 1,400 more on Blosser coming up, 750 on the south end of Bradley, plus those on Stillwell, Jensen's Crossing, Cobblestone, and my golly, this infrastructure of Orchid can't handle all this stuff unless they make some other access roads. I mean, that's the thing that they should look at, I think so. Now, this is a good plan. She's moved ahead here with single-family homes on the outskirts. That's a good idea, except the thing on DR 20. And I suggest that all these people are in favor of DR 20. They should be mandatory. They ought to live there for 5 years and try this traffic on Bradley and see how they like that. It's impossible, even if they put stoplights in. That's just going to back the traffic up from one corner to another. And what good will that do? I think, if anything, it should be all single family if they want to do it. And that, look at all the other key sites that are available, the other 5 on the map here, before just an idea is consummated to put multifamily homes in there. And there's no such thing as affordable housing. We know that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Watson. Leroy Cadena, followed by Donna Dart.
Hello, Chairman. My name is Leroy Cadena. I live at 1136 Kit Way in Orchid. Also a civil engineer. I submitted a letter. It was supposed to be read into the record. I was wondering, number one, why it wasn't read. It's also signed by fellow neighbors. I have a copy if you don't have a copy.
Mr. Chair, it's in your packet.
Yes, it is. We received it this morning.
Yes. Mr. Chair,
yes.
If I can interrupt for a moment. This letter is more than 1 page in length, so it does need to be voted into the record.
All right.
Maybe that's, I don't know if that's what you're speaking to, Mr. Cadena.
I wasn't aware of that requirement.
And if the commission would like somebody to read it into the record, we can certainly do that.
Everybody's, we'll take the testimony first, and then we'll read it into the record.
Well,
I mean, we'll take it into the record.
my testimony is based on some of these concerns that we have. The first concern that we have is the compliance with the Orchid Community Plan. You know, you spent a lot of money on that plan, and it doesn't seem like you're really considering the recommendations in that plan. We're asking here about the staff report indicates that the dune scrub habitat has been overgrazed, basically, so thereby the owner is eliminating the problem themselves by overgrazing it. That doesn't seem quite fair. I don't think, to just ignore that issue because it's been overgrazed. We have other considerations. The Orchid Community Plan, it wasn't mentioned in the staff report. The Orchid Community Plan only allows for one access on Bradley. They're providing two accesses to Bradley. You know, there's no discussion about that in the staff report. I don't know if this has also been brought up by Mrs. Tamora's office or not, but there again, we don't have any information on that we would like to see what's going on there. There's a 15-foot landscape buffer that's supposed to be talked about. This plan that we're looking at, of course, I realize it's just preliminary. It seems like the single-family residences are going to be backed up right up against Bradley. And so we have a question about that issue. Let's see, what else did we have here? I guess I'll just read this part here. The staff report mentions that several key sites are under consideration for rezoning, and key site 30 is one of them. The proposed rezoning delineation does not seem to be consistent with the surrounding areas. All existing development around the site has been zoned 10R1 for approximately over 20 years. For the proposed rezoning scheme, areas to be north and south and east will be buffered by the DR20 zoning and by new R1 single-family zoning. As residents of Village Hills located across Bradley from the proposed rezone to high density, we ask that the same buffering with R1 zoning as the other areas be bordered by the project. So in other words, we're asking for some R1 zoning along Bradley Road if you decide to go with the rezone. Other concerns we'd like to see addressed, which are not mentioned in the staff report, are the impact to the infrastructure, such as traffic, road maintenance, schools. I got a letter here from my children go to Dunlap. I have a letter here from the email from the principal, and they're already up at 630 students. We've got a problem there. I don't know what school district or what school these children would attend, if they would be divided up into the existing schools. Other concerns that we had, we're potentially bringing over, possibly 1,000 new residents by this project, and it just seems like the water issue has been looked at or just talked about, but none of these other issues have been talked about. What's happening to our area? On a personal note, this is Santa Barbara County. It's not the city of Santa Maria. Santa Barbara County has been noted for having a more open spaces. We don't have signs on the highways. We don't have the density that they do in LA County,
Could you wrap up your comments now, please?
Sure. So the other concern is that, with the DR1 zoning is the topography. You have a high hill right there. I have a topographic map. I don't know if any have ever been submitted or if you've looked at it. And those DR1 houses, some of them you showed were 3 stories high. And they're going to be able to view right down into the backyards, into the houses of people on the opposite side of Bradley Road. So those are our comments.
Thank you very much. Donna Dart, followed by James Pridwell.
Are you going to read that letter in, sir?
Yes, we are.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, my name is Donna Dart. My husband and I live at 4381 Heather Circle. Our home is across from Woodmere, which is on the north side of Key Site 30. We moved to our home in 1989 and raised our 3 daughters there. Coming to and talking at these meetings has actually been very hard for me. I personally know Lonnie Hunter and Lloyd Tamura and have for a long time. I would really like not to be here, but I am so strongly opposed to changing the zoning on Key Site 30 because I believe it to be a disastrous decision to the future development of the Orchid area. This site was kept Ag 140 in the 1997 Orchid Community Plan. There was so much talk and written in the 90s about this property because it was in a flight pattern, so much of it could not be built on. It would be used for recreational purpose for the people of Orchid, and it had a building site for one building, possibly a library, and that is why you have had so much testimony that people thought this property would remain open space. Apparently what we did not know, the people of Orchid, is that those talks never came to fruition. Unical sold the property in 1999 to an investment company for $300,000. L&A Hunter bought the property last April for $1,750,000. L&A has said that in investigating this property, even before purchasing it, she had been strongly encouraged from county planning in Santa Barbara that this would be a good site for state-mandated high-density affordable housing in order to meet their quota. This property quite possibly is the only hope for the people of Orchid to have any recreational buildings and parks at all. This site is literally down the street, a 5-minute walk from Rigetti and St. Joseph High School. It would be a tremendous site for a youth and senior center. Can you see a building, one building, a senior center on one side, on one end, and a youth center on the other end? In the middle is a large kitchen and community room, an auditorium that they could both share. They also share a parking lot. Can you see softball fields, basketball courts, a soccer field, and park area? Can you see a quilting club or chess club in the senior center open to teens who want to learn but wouldn't go to a senior center but would go through a door to a class where they were most welcome? Lori Tamura has talked about the vote for a service district for Orchid that failed in the 1990s. I'd like to talk about that time. California had been in a recession and was coming out of it. Our area was still reeling from the recession and the loss of jobs at Vandenberg Air Force Base. There was a general consensus that still remains to this date that this land was locked up. It would remain open space. It would never have housing on it and would be used for the recreational uses of the Orchid community in the future. People didn't see the need for a service district at that time. But since then, the voters of the Orchid area have supported a school bond on the first vote and supported the bond for Allen Hancock Junior College. Things and times change, and the needs for a recreational area grow stronger as housing develops all over this community. I am a realtor. I have been selling homes in my community for over 25 years. My family came here in the 1920s. My children are third-generation Santa Marians. I love my community. There are already 3,000 houses planned for Orchid now. 1,200 are being built or soon to be built in Orchid. More than 4,000 houses have been built in Santa Maria since 1997, and more are coming. Santa Maria has a 400-unit family park with manufactured housing coming very soon, and these are supposed to be very, very affordable. With new home product, there are over 1,000 houses and condos for sale in the Santa Maria Orchid area right now. Houses are staying for months on the market without selling.
Could you please wrap up?
With so much for sales prices come down, buyer's market. In an economic update I went to last year, the speaker said that 7,000 people commute south every day on the freeway for their jobs in South County. Santa Maria and Orchid cannot provide for all the housing needs of the whole community. Please do not vote to rezone this property. Please look into the future and see a vote that you're proud of and made today to save this property for the future community and recreational uses of the people of Orchid. Thank you.
James Frabel, followed by Lavina Hilbert.
Hi, my name is Jim Pribble. I live at 4381 Lyndhurst, which is a corner of Woodmere and Lyndhurst. I look across the street to this open space now. I'm opposed to this project and actually any change to that zoning. If by any chance it does go through and you dump all that traffic on Bradley, it is going to be just one nightmare. And I don't care if you put a light at Amethyst and if you put one on Woodmere and you put one on Union Parkway, that's too many people for that area. Thank you.
Thank you. Lavina Hilbert. Hillerant. Is it Lavina? Keith.
Lavina Hilbrandt.
Lavina.
I was chased out of Santa Maria because of how that city's being run, so I came to Orchid and brought our revenue and found this beautiful home. My backyard is the property there, and I oppose it, of course. I just, I agree with everything that's been said against this thing, the traffic, the noise, the population, it's just going to be a terrible thing. I hope you don't go through with it. It just, we hear about Lene's money all the time. What about all our money, all the work we've done to get our beautiful homes? And now this is all going to be changed if this goes through. It's not going to be good. So I'm saying, please, don't rezone. Thank you.
Thank you. Keith Ramsey, followed by Kelly Blair.
My name's Keith Ramsey. I've lived 12 years at 4395 Glines Avenue. I live at the intersection of Village, Bradley, Glines, and this new project will be right at the mouth of my property. This was ag zone when I bought there. Why are we changing? I had a view of the cattle, the coyotes, the squirrels. I enjoyed that place. There was no road that continued on from Village. You could only make a turn east off of Bradley. So I knew there would not be a light there. Now there definitely will be a signal there. So I'll get to hear all the accelerations, all the stops, everything when this project goes through. How long until we rezone the no-build zone? You know, we have it as a no-build zone. I was told, well, nothing will ever go there because it's a no-build zone. Well, some developer will come before you and say it's time to rechange that. So this was an ag zone. It should remain an ag zone. I bought on the corner because there was no signals on the notice that we received by mail. I got it on the 21st. I would appreciate a little more notice than that. We have to meet here at 9 a.m. I'm a working person. I wish we could have these meetings in the evening. I think you'd get a better participation from other occupants in the area so that you'd get a full view of who are for and against this project. 12 soccer fields approved were asked for, and now they've gone to none. I don't think they have the full community sense of spirit here. Seems like if they were concerned with the community, they would have reduced to 3 or 4 soccer fields so that the kids would still have a place to play. The topography of this property, my backyard looks out onto this property. There's a hill right where this affordable, the 6 plexes are going to go. They're going to be looking down if this hill isn't removed. I'd like to know if that hill is going to be reduced down. There's a greater density in the interior according to your slide. I don't know where that's at because bordering my property, it doesn't look like there's any reduction in density. I'd like to see the single lots border this whole project rather than on just the 2 sides. The slide that the gentleman put up of the 17.2 units per acre, I know where that's at. People cannot even park in front of their own homes. They either have to park in their driveway or they have to go park in community stalls that are down away from their homes. They cannot even park in front of their own house. I think that's ridiculous. The DR20 homes do not match anything in the area. So I just don't think they would fit the Orchid general plan.
Thank you.
I hope you'll oppose this project.
Thank you. Kelly Blair, followed by Marilyn Schobel.
Good morning. My name is Kelly Blair. I live at 4380 Lyndhurst Circle. I've lived in the Orchid area all my life. I attended Patterson Road, Lakeview, and Marquette High School. And my children now are currently attending Patterson Road. My husband and I chose to live in the Orchid area because we felt it was the best place to raise our family. We didn't choose to live in Santa Maria. We felt that the Orchid area, I had a wonderful life, and I wanted to keep it that for my children. So I'm here today to express my husband's and I opposition to the proposed development of Keysite 30. There are so many issues that have not been addressed, and one of them is the schools. I feel all that housing will negatively impact the local schools. There'll be overcrowding. I want my child to get the best education possible, and I don't see that happening with all those homes. Or I don't want my kids bused halfway across Santa Maria. Our other concerns is the traffic on Bradley. It's horrible now. I pray going down Woodmere that I'll make it safely across Bradley to get to wherever I'm going. And if this goes through, I hate to see what it'll be like. We feel our quality of life will change drastically and not for the better, and so we are opposed to the rezoning. I would hope that further look to see what, we've got to look at other options. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Marilyn Schobel, followed by Bill Cuthbert.
Gentlemen and Miss Brown, thank you for allowing me to talk to you today. I've been here at almost all the meetings. I'm begging you, most of the people in this area do not want this development, and I'm begging you to listen to them. It would mean I was the first time we've mentioned schools. I'm very concerned about the schools in the area, being an old school marm. I'm concerned that we won't have enough policemen, enough firemen, and then all the traffic, and all the smog from all the traffic, and all the cars, and all the noise. And besides, as you know, on the corner, just a block away, we're going to have a superhighway. And up above, we're going to have more planes flying into the airport. This area we can't have more housing too. I beg you to listen to all these people. I represent Woodmere. I live at 835 Zachary Court. Most of the people in this area are totally opposed to this. Please, listen to the people. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Bill Cuthbert, followed by Judy Holloway.
Commissioners, I'm Bill Cuthbert. I live at the north end of Cherry, 4555 Cherry Avenue. My comments will be limited to the development at the southwest corner of Site 30. The lots in my neighborhood are in excess of 12,000 square feet, including those on Royal Terrace, which runs east from Cherry Avenue. The current plan shows lot developments of 8,000 to 10,000 square feet, which is certainly a noticeable step down from the lot sizes currently in that neighborhood. If it's necessary to develop that area, I would request that the lot sizes be commensurate with the existing lot sizes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Judy Holloway, followed by Susan Clucker.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and Planning Commission. I live at 885 Amethyst Drive. I'd like to piggyback on what Ms. Piper, I believe her name is, said about the village road where there's going to be a light, and where Father Ed failed to state that when today was the first day of school, and I had the privilege of driving my son to Lakeview Junior High. I pull out of Amethyst. Right there, I take my life in my own hands. And I turn to the left, and I come down. The traffic goes, even if there's a light that's on Village, the traffic is already on Village because kids are going to Rigetti and St. Joe's. And then with the DR20, why would it be that, you know, the people with less financial income have to be on a thoroughway with planes flying over them? Why can't they have 10,000 square foot lots? Why do we have to impact the community with all these cars? We don't have the infrastructure. We don't have fire. We don't have police. We already have a highway patrol that parks right there on Bradley and Amethyst before I turn in. And at 7 o'clock at night, people are zooming down there. This morning, my son and I were I was taking him to school. Here's a motorcycle just flying past. Kids are walking, trying to go to school at St. Joe's and Rigetti. This just isn't feasible, and I really oppose it. I ask that you hear the community, and most of all, stick with the Orchid Community Plan. Don't expedite this project for financial gain. Slow down. Hear the community.
Thank you. Susan Clucker, followed by George Pierce.
Good morning, and it's Kluker, just for the reference. I tell people I ain't no chicken.
We'll give you an extra 30 seconds for that.
I'm here today because I'm an orchidteer, and I've lived my life within a 4-mile radius and want to continue living my life within a 4-mile radius. And I live at, my husband and I and our son, who is on that Bradley Road as a high school student, live at 4471 Glines Avenue. And I'm really impressed with the articulate neighbors we have here. And the orchid community has our particular house. When we moved in, the one concern that we had, because we overlooked this open space, was the poor man's ocean that came with it. Does anybody know what the poor man's ocean is? sound of cars going back and forth. It's the poor man's ocean. And now we're talking about possibly a tsunami. And from our point of view, because you can hear the cars even though we're higher up. So, and we have taught our son, you don't take a left-hand turn from Village onto Bradley. It's just not worth it. You're putting your life in your hands. So I was wondering if you could educate us on, is there a possibility of just going forward with a traffic study first, so that Lene Hunter doesn't have more money involved, we don't have more of motions and more time off work to come to hearings, that we just study, since that's the primary issue other than density, can we just isolate that portion before rezoning happens? Is that a possibility?
Probably.
Okay, thank you. I just didn't know if it was or not.
We'll answer all those questions later.
Okay, thank you. And of course, you know, I know I can't afford to protect my view, but I have spoken with Lene Hunter, and she does seem like she has integrity to honor certain portions and try to listen to the neighbors. So I'm in a mixed bag position. Don't want the ocean to turn into a tsunami, and want to have a little view of the sunset without people looking into our backyard. And I still cannot believe, for the record again, that the Orchid Community Plan doesn't have an expiration date, that we all, as people who participated in that plan, we can go, okay, it was going to end on this date, we know it, you know, and whatever plan happens next, that there is some kind of expiration date, so we know what we're getting into when we purchase our homes. And anyway, I thank you for your time.
Thank you. George Pierce, followed by John Lopez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. George Pierce, 1411 Stubblefield Road in Orchid. The Orchid Community Plan took 10 years and millions of dollars. I attended most of the 100 hearings, many of them right here in this room, 10 hours long, 2 of them 14 hours long, with me the only one in the audience, and that was when the worst decisions were made. After 14 hours, that your predecessors would agree to anything just to get to go home. Anyhow, after spending all that money and all that effort, we come out with a halfway decent plan. If you approve this massive suggestion, you're setting a precedence for gutting the entire Orchid plan. Now, the previous owner of this property, Randy Wheeler, met with Olga Howard and I. Olga Howard at that time was the president of the Orchid Area Advisory Group, and we met with John Zorowich from Planning and Development. And Randy said he could give us the library and the community center on Bradley if we would support 200 affordable senior units. That should be the very minimum requirement. I request you to lay this plan to rest. Thank you.
Thank you. George Lopez. John.
Thank you for letting me speak. Most of the people that are speaking, or all of the people that are speaking against this project, as well as myself, are very vehemently, or have very strong feelings about this. My business is closed right now so that I can be here at this meeting. A lot of the other people here have taken time off from their work to be here at this meeting, to oppose this thing. I find it very, very interesting that the only people, aside from the applicant, that are in favor are 2 people that have no vested interest. They don't own property in the area. Father Tom and the Honorable member of the City Council, they don't have a vested interest in this area. We do. We've spent a lot of money on a plan that we're now going to throw out the window. Why? It doesn't make sense. Everybody that has spoken at this meeting is against it. Isn't that significant? Not one person that has a vested interest is speaking in favor. Doesn't that give you a clue? Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, and with that, that was our last speaker. I'd like a motion to introduce this letter from several people. It's dated August 21st to the Santa Barbara Planning Commission. It's subject Keysite 30 General Plan Amendment and Rezone. Commissioner Cooney.
I will make the motion, Mr. Chair, with the comment that whatever is the future of this property, we're certain to have more hearings on it, and I would encourage staff to give as much notice as possible of future meetings so that we can get these materials in on time and we have a chance to consider them.
All right, thank you very much. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Boyson. Ms. Mendoza, would you call the roll?
Commissioner Boyson?
Aye.
Commissioner Brown?
Aye.
Commissioner Cooney?
Aye.
Commissioner Valencia?
Aye.
Vote carries 4-0.
All right, thank you. And with that, Ms. Tamora, did you like to rebut what testimonies come before us?
Good morning, Blair Tamura again. Basically, what I'd like to say to the community and to the Planning Commission is that most of the points that were raised involved the next step of the process. The questions in regards to traffic, noise, visual resources, biological resources, impacts to the flight path of the airport, the school district, recreational needs. These are all of the elements that would be incorporated in the environmental review document and the technical work that would happen. Recognize that an EIR is already moving forward on this site for the housing element. The effort that we're willing to move forward with is more detail and more information than would happen with a global housing element EIR. We understand the passion of the community. We understand change is difficult. I know that dealing with projects on a regular basis, dealing with the community is something that we have tried to attempt to do here as we've evolved this project. And there's going to be more changes to the project as we move forward. So I see this as a community partnership. There is going to be some kind of development on the site, whether it's a 200-unit senior project with a library and a community center, or it's going to be a project comparable to this. The next step of the process is the Sequa environmental review process, and we're asking you today to initiate that process, which could take a year or two or more to go through. So to allay the concerns of the community today, this is not an approval. And I think staff made that clear in their initial presentation. This is an initiation of the process. And we're really looking forward to working with the community. A lot has been accomplished already. And the information that you're looking for, that technical information, is the next step of the process. And a lot of money is involved in that, and a lot of efforts involved in that. And we look forward to that process.
All right, thank you.
I'm available for any questions.
Commissioner Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Murrah, to address the community's concern about schools, is that also addressed in the EIR?
Yes,
Yes,
it
it
is.
is. All
It
right.
is a section in the environmental
All right.
document as part of the public facilities.
Okay, good. Thank
and
you.
Public service section.
All right, thank you.
Commissioner Boyson.
One of the speakers was questioning the 7,000 square foot lots perimetering on Woodmere. Are those, is Woodmere a 10R1 or a?
It is.
It is. And then, and those lots that are backing up are basically.
Adam,
have
could you put
proposed
the other site
7,000
plan
square
up
foot.
if you could? The one with the actual lots on it. I think it's the one Commissioner Boyson is looking at. Yeah. Yes, the lots along the perimeter here, this is Woodmere up here. These are 7,000 square foot lots. What we tried to do is attempt to match the property lines, so they're shallower lots, but the property lines are pretty much matching along that section. Along this section here was 10,000 square foot lots. Along the edges here, we do have some larger lots and smaller lots in the interior. Again, trying to mimic the neighboring parcels.
Okay, but, okay, so, all right, I see, thank you.
And just to address one of the other comments, there is a good change in topography on this site, and there will be grading plans, tentative maps, a lot of technical work that's going to be looking at the site changes and topography on the site for the developed area, not dealing with the open space area.
All right, thank you very much. Any further questions? Commissioner Brown.
Just a question. One of the speakers spoke about sufficient parking, and I know with affordable housing developments there are reduction in parking. It would seem with a site like this that you could provide, just because of the configuration of what you're proposing, that you could provide sufficient parking on site or nearby. I realize that we're far away from that. We've got to go through the EIR. Can you just address that concerning sufficient parking on site?
The current parking requirement is that you provide 2 parking spaces per unit and a guest parking space for every 5. So that is the requirement. We can request less in an affordable project as one of the benefits to providing affordable. Obviously, with a site like this, I think there's a lot of opportunity to provide the required parking. You know, we'll be looking at designs, whether they have carports, how the pods in the neighborhoods are set up. There's a lot of design elements that need to be integrated into the project, but that's the standard.
All right, thank you very much. Any further questions? If not, thank you very much, Mr.
Thank
Mora.
you. Again, we request the Planning Commission's initiation of this process through the housing element, and look forward to coming back to you next year with the project.
All right, thank you very much. And we'll come back to the Planning Commission. There was a public hearing when everybody was speaking. That was a public hearing. And Mr. Allen, the public hearing will remain open because this project will remain probably for 2 or 3 years, or a couple of years, or do we close the public hearing now?
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, this is a hearing to determine whether you desire to go forward with initiation of general plan and rezone, and if you act upon that today, the public hearing should now be closed. And in the future, there will, as you've noted, be many, probably, certainly a few, if not many, hearings on the actual discretionary actions themselves.
All right, fine. And for today's hearing, public hearing is closed. We're back to the Planning Commission. What are the, this is the 4th district item, but I'd like to hear from my fellow commissioners. Commissioner Cooney.
I have a question, Mr. Chair, for staff. Mr. Murrah made this statement that some development is going to occur on this property. Presumably, if she's correct in that, we're going to have these issues of traffic in particular, more noise, all of the environmental concerns, and it's a rather fundamental question, I guess, to you, Mr. Baumann. What exactly is the level of development that would be permissible under the existing general plan?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Cooney, under the current zoning, the Ag 140 zoning and the A1 designation, as I mentioned in the presentation, it's one single-family dwelling with agricultural structures, and that's essentially it. So that's, as I mentioned, any type of project here is going to require a general plan amendment and a rezone.
So just to follow on that, Mr. Murrah's comment was based on the assumption that we would initiate a general plan amendment of some kind.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Cooney, possibly that, or the efforts of the housing element team and determining that this is an appropriate site for affordable housing.
All right, thank you. Anybody else? Commissioner Boyson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I obviously we've got you know, we've had a lot of testimony, and we've already looked at this project, and we will looked at this project quite a bit, and we'll look at a proposed project on this in the future, I'm sure. I think the key here is that we are really not approving a project. All we're doing is just saying that we'll accept the application. And, you know, this is an initiation of a general plan amendment and a rezone. There are so many details that I'm not comfortable with on this project, but I feel it is the right of the applicant to be able to try and answer some of those questions. There's going to be this traffic is just a huge concern. There's no way we're going to dump 300 housing the traffic from 300 housing units out onto Bradley. I am not going to vote for 17 traffic lights along Bradley, and I mean that's what we're going to start ending up with. That's just not acceptable. We're going to need to get creative. We're going to need to find alternate entries to this project. I'm not sure how you're going to do it, but it certainly configured the way it is, that's not going to work for me. So there's got to be some creativity there in that, and it's got to be done without the standard solution of one more traffic light. I'm not going to accept that. As far as, you know, there's a lot of environmental questions that are going to need to be answered. Certainly the Orca Community Plan had some very, very legitimate concerns, and I think all of those are going to have to be answered to everybody's satisfaction. That, you know, there was a reason that the Orca Community Plan left this vacant, and one of them was this dune scrub habitat, and I think that's going to have to be analyzed as well as all other environmental issues on this property. The overall neighborhood compatibility, this project should enhance the neighborhood, not distract from the neighborhood. We need to look at, you know, some sort of, you know, perhaps it's passive recreation. We've had the suggestion that I think Ms. Dart brought up the suggestion that, you know, maybe we look at a softball field and a soccer field and a tennis court and, you know, community center, a senior center, whatever it might be, as incorporated into this project. Something's got to be given back to the community on this. Something's got to be given so that the community can stand behind this and say that, geez, we really have a positive addition here, not just more people. You know, the idea of senior for the high density has been brought up. I throw that out as something that I think that should probably be looked at. The having so many cars, the parking idea, I think somebody brought up that they don't like the idea of having a bunch of carports on the DR20, and all I'm reminded of is I remember Mike Topes one time saying is that if you want to see a traffic problem in high density housing, go ahead and put garages in there, because then they'll just store everything in the garage and park everywhere else. So you know, I don't like carports either, but Mr. Topes really made his point with me on that one. But I'm you know, there's a lot of positives about this plan. We took the intense recreation off the table. I think that's a good thing. We were not going to be a regional soccer park. It just that wasn't right for this project. Although I think that there is something that can be done out there. Perhaps something needs to be considered as we go through this. I think we've heard from the community that they want some sort of assurances that we're not going to just decide that, well, maybe it's not a no-build zone. Maybe that can be, you know, so maybe there's some sort of an easement that needs to be placed over this, the open space that does not allow for future build-out. Again, those are things that we're going to have to analyze as we go forward. I think some work needs to be done on these perimeter lots, especially the lots down here along in the Cherry neighborhood and the neighborhoods that surround the property to the west, and make sure that those lots provide minimal impact to the surrounding neighborhoods. On those perimeter lots, I think one of the concerns was, you know, geez, we're going to have three-story houses looking down at us. Now we're not going to have three-story houses looking down on the existing neighborhoods. There's going to have to be, and these are project-specific conditions, are going to have to be considered in there for single stories or no windows, second-story windows facing the existing perimeter lots, something along that line. So those sort of things, though, that I think that are details that we will be going through as we analyze this project. The neighbors that are asking for the EIR and traffic study first, absolutely. That's got to be the first thing done. We've got to figure out the traffic and the environmental impacts before we even consider a project. So I would, if we need to make that a condition of the initiation, then so be it. But I don't think we do. I think that's part of the normal process, and maybe would ask staff to comment along that. Otherwise, I certainly can support the initiation of this project over any of the projects that we've seen before. I think that this is it's a pretty good compromise. At least the density is a pretty good compromise. We're going from potentially 15 acres of DR20 zoning that has been proposed by the in the environmental, or is being considered in the environmental impact review by comprehensive planning, down to approximately 10 acres. And we are providing the neighbors with some assurances that the perimeter lots that immediately border them will not have that high-density housing that is under consideration. So, there's a lot of positives about this project. I think it is worthy of initiation, and I could certainly support the initiation.
Thank you, Commissioner Boyson. Anybody else?
Yeah.
Commissioner Brown.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Infill projects are always very difficult for the community. And I hear their concerns about traffic and circulation. And one of the reasons I'm going to support this project is, in order for any kind of project, we need to see what the EIR informs us, what it tells us about these things, because it may have great influence on what is, I know it will have great influence on what goes here. So we need to see that, and the community will have the opportunity to participate, to comment on the EIR. And it very well may reveal that what is being proposed is not what is possible. So and unfortunately in this process we don't get the EIR first and then do the rezone. The process is the process that we're undergoing at the moment, where the applicant makes the request and then we do the EIR. So unfortunately we have to be patient until we see that. But for me, it will be about traffic, and it is about circulation. Those are always the greatest impacts on any infill project. And I think that we have to be very sensitive to those issues, of just how the exit and entry into the project, or the proposed project, or whatever might eventually go here, because that does seem to affect everybody the most. And you're right about the infrastructure. Certainly the carrying capacity is only so much. So hopefully the EIR will be broad and very comprehensive and inform us on all the issues that the community has addressed. But this is a project for me that the glass is both half full and half empty. For an infill project, I think it's unusual to have a project where you would have so much open space. And living in a community where we're losing these great open spaces, that here, if there is to be dense housing, you have it buffered by this huge amount of open space. And while nobody likes dense housing, I don't like dense housing. I think that it could be mitigated by the great amount of open space that's here. And certainly this is just a proposal. This is not a project. I know that it will probably change several times over before we see a final proposal. So I look forward to the EIR and seeing what's in the EIR and how that's going to shape any project that goes here. But I am supportive of the applicant's request. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Brown. Commissioner Cooney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll just make two comments. Certainly I support the comments of my fellow commissioners that have already been made, but I do want to mention something we have talked a lot about on this commission during my term of the importance of affordable housing. A couple of speakers addressed the issue of the pressure on schools and the need for additional public safety to be considered in any kind of development on this property, and I absolutely agree. And I think we've all been told many times in the past that we're having a real problem in our communities retaining good teachers in our schools and public safety officials as well, because there is no affordable housing. Most of the people we've heard from today, like the group of us, have been fortunate enough to be able to afford houses or purchase them at a time when they were affordable by today's standards. Our children don't have that advantage. They will have to leave this area, the beautiful Orchid area, and find housing elsewhere if they want to live here at all. So I do think we have to look for appropriate sites. Having said that, I'm not sure this is one of them. I really have doubts that this particular project is suitable for affordable housing in the sense that we have more dense zoning than currently is in existence in the surrounding neighborhoods. But the environmental review should reveal whether this site can handle the additional pressure or not. I agree with those speakers who would rather have the environmental review occur before the initiation, but I think in order to have the most valuable environmental document, it does make sense to blend the overall housing environmental review process with a site-specific environmental review of this site. Then we'll all know. And I want to make it clear that a vote to initiate this project does not presume that it's environmentally acceptable for more dense housing.
Thank you, Commissioner Cooney. All right, and I guess I'm the last one. It's a 4th District item. When we first started, the applicant came in with a project that had everybody up in arms. 11 soccer fields, DR20 throughout the project, and I could understand the people were very upset about it. The density was beyond what the area could really hold. And so the applicant came up and said, well, I had a different project in mind when I came in, but the Planning Development Department said, you have to meet these obligations of the state, and we need this type of zoning. Well, she presented it like the staff wanted it. It wasn't her project. And of course, this room was filled with people, and everybody was upset about it, and the Planning Commission understood. And we said, well, that project isn't something that we could go forward with. She came in with a second plan that was modified that reduced the soccer fields, reduced the housing and so on. And again, the project was not accepted. And now she comes in with a project that has no soccer fields, and yet I hear some of the people say we should have a couple of baseball fields, we should have a recreation center and a senior center. So it's kind of a flip-flop. The people didn't want it there, and some of the people who came here are saying now we should have it in there. She had, the applicant, by she I mean the applicant, had proposed possibly giving some property for a library. They don't want the library. Today somebody indicated that, why don't we have a library? Why isn't some property in there for a library? Well, the soccer fields are gone, the library is gone, the playing fields, everything is gone, and we have a different type of projects. We've gone away from the DR20 to residential lots, 7,000 square foot residential lots. This is the third cut. There will be probably a fourth and fifth and sixth cut, but we're approaching a mirror image of the lots that are surrounding this project, and that probably is very good. A mirror image is a new term that's being used here, and that sounds pretty good. The mirror image would be on Woodmere. It appears that there are 10,000 square foot lots. We don't know that. Our map doesn't indicate that. On Amherst, it appears that there are 7,000 and 8,000 square foot lots. It doesn't show it on our lot. We're still at very preliminary stages, but it appears that we're approaching that. The only thing that appears to be a major problem besides the traffic is the DR20. We don't know if that's going to end up being DR20. It could end up being DR16 or DR12. We don't know. We don't have any idea yet. We're still in the very preliminary stages. The applicant wants to submit a project in, but we have been the obstacle in many ways, and the public has been an obstacle in many ways. At some point, there's going to be a project in here, and the applicant is asking us, let me initiate a project. Let me bring something to you that you can talk about in great detail. But at this present time, we just have general, very general type presentations. To keep a majority of the project in open space, I think is probably the biggest thing that's available for this project. Keeping it open space as a condition of approval would mean that there would never be any development in there. I think at this point, the EIR would be the ideal thing to look at. Again, I'm not going to repeat all the things that my fellow commissioners have said, but everybody has covered all the items that need to be reviewed. And at this time, I think it would be appropriate to initiate the project and let it go. There will be probably 2 or 3 or 4 more public hearings discussing all these things in great detail. You will be able to discuss the particular lot size, the particular density, the particular egress and ingress for this lot. You'll be able to look at the water issues in great detail. Right now, we don't have any of that information. In general, we have your comments that you would not like that developed. Well, let me remind you that in the houses that you're living in, people who were your neighbors before probably didn't want your houses developed, you know, and it's something that's just going to happen. So with that, Mr. Baumann, you indicated there was some changes to the staff recommendation, the language to initiate this project. Did you want to give us new language?
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, I've changed it in the slide up there. So that is the recommendation from P&D.
All right. And with that, I would recommend to move to the next step forward, the language recommended by the staff. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Ms. Mendoza, would you call the roll?
Commissioner Boyson?
Aye.
Commissioner Brown?
Aye.
Commissioner Cooney?
Aye.
Commissioner Valencia?
Aye.
Vote carries 4-0.
All right, thank you. Planning Commission will take a short break to set up for the next item. Item number 3, the Brightburn, item number 4, I'm sorry, the Brightburn Energy Orchid Hill Diatomite Project. Ms. Mendoza, could you read that into the record?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. The following is the hearing on the request of John Deacon, agent for the owner, Brightburn Energy, to consider case number 05PPP1, application filed on July 1st, 2005, for approval of an oil drilling and production plan and to approve the negative declaration 06 NGD 18 pursuant to the state guidelines for implementation of Sequa.
Thank you. Any site visits or ex parte? Commissioner Boyson.
Yes, I was hosted to a site visit by Mr. Deacon and some members of the Brightburn Energy staff, and I have had a couple of brief conversations since then with Mr. Deacon.
All right. Ms. Brown?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. This morning, Ms. Musgrave from Tracer gave me a site visit, as well as I met with several members of the Brightburn staff, and I appreciated their getting up at that early hour to take me around and show me the site and answer my many questions.
All right, thank you. And Commissioner Cooney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wasn't able to get to the site before Sunday, and I, unlike Commissioner Brown, was embarrassed to ask for a site visit on Sunday. So I got as far as the gate, and my personal observations are somewhat limited, but I've had no ex parte communications.
All right, thank you. And I had a briefing at the site with Mr. Deacon and some members of the organization some time back. We spent about a couple of hours up there driving around and looking at the entire site. And with that, Mr. Rodriguez. Oh, Mr.
Chairman,
Bell.
I'm sorry, I'm going to be starting today. I just wanted to give you a little bit of background on this before we get into the project today. We have prepared a packet for you this morning that you each have now with a cover memo that explains that we had mistakenly applied a standard from APCD rather than using the county standard for air quality. And because of that, we're asking you today, even though we're making a presentation on the entire project, to just consider phase 1 of the project. The attached sheets go through and make changes to all of the important areas that were needed to be able to take action today on phase 1. But we do have a solution to bringing phase 2 back. It's twofold. We aren't sure which we'll eventually do, but we do know we'll be bringing it back to you probably within a month or so. But at this point, we did want to move the project forward so that they could get started on phase 1. So that's basically the change of what you have today. Everything else is accurate in there, and then Steve will be going through the PowerPoint presentation now for you.
All right, thank you very much. Mr. Rodriguez.
Thank you. As it's been announced, this is the Brightburn Orcutt Hill diatomite oil production project. The project site is located in the Orcutt oil field. The general project area is highlighted in yellow on the screen. The site is about 2 miles west of Highway 101, about 2.5 miles east of Highway 135. It's about 1.5 miles south of East Rice Ranch Road, which is sort of the southern boundary of the Orcutt community. And it's about a little over 1 mile south of the Rice Ranch residential project. The original project application proposed to develop the project in 2 different phases. I wanted to briefly just describe some of the components of the project that would be developed as part of the entire project as a result of phases 1 and 2. The project would include 96 oil wells. 95 of those wells would be new wells. They would be developed in 6 pods of 16 wells each. There would be 1 tank battery developed in the project area, and within that tank battery area there would be 3 steam generators that would generate, of course, steam that would be used to enhance oil production, the new wells provided by the project. The water that would be used to generate the steam is production water, or water that is generated or produced by existing oil field operations. And that's a brine water, so there's a water treatment system that would be provided to clean up the water before it's used to generate steam. Hydrogen sulfide removal equipment would be provided on site. On-site pipelines for oil, water, and steam movement. And then finally, the produced oil would be primarily taken off the project site using an existing pipeline. This is a close-up aerial of the project area, and you can see where the oil pods would be developed. This is the existing office building is here. Here's the parking lot, and you can see the 6 pods are highlighted. And the tank farm area is kind of a long linear feature near the existing developed area. One of the unique things with this project, all the new oil wells are on existing pads, and they have existing roads traveling to the pads. For those of you that weren't able to take the tour of the site, we have a virtual tour here today. This is the area that would be used as the tank battery and the other steam generators and the other accessory equipment. And you can see it's an existing site that's been previously graded and cleared. It's a little hard to see in this picture, but the site slopes down into the picture. So while it's relatively level, it does slope down. Grading in this area is primarily to level the site to support the proposed tanks. This would be well site number 1. This is actually located very close to the tank battery area. Site has been previously cleared. You can see that there's vegetation, oak trees, and some other sensitive plants right adjacent to the well site. The original application for the project proposed to enlarge many of these existing well pad areas, which would have resulted in the removal of oak trees and other sensitive plants. The project was redesigned to reduce the size of the well pads, and now primarily the grading that is proposed is to just provide a level surface to support the new oil wells. This is well site number 2. The existing equipment would be removed. This site is fairly close to the edge of the Graciosa Ridge, and the Santa Maria area can be seen over there. Well site number 3, again, an existing pad. There were some possible wetland plants in this area, and those would be avoided by the project. Well site number 4, existing pad. Well site number 5, again, very developed. This building would be removed and the pad would be located in that area. And well site number 6, again, you can see vegetation adjacent to the pad, and that would not be disturbed by the project. With the steam injection project, there's no need for the pumping units on the well pads. This is a typical view of the steam injection wellhead that would be used. That's probably about 5 feet tall. So it's pretty small in its appearance. This is a diagram of the proposed tank battery area and the steam generator area. Existing office building this is here. This is the parking area over here. You saw a picture of the compression building compressor building that was going to be removed. That structure is right there. Proposed structure would be here, and that's where the water treatment equipment would be provided. Again, the project would be using produced water for steam generation. The oil field now produces about 75,000 barrels of water per day. The project would be using about 13,500 barrels of water per day. That's about a little over 600 acre feet of water per year. So it's a lot of water. Steam generation units are down here. They would be powered primarily by utility natural gas. The natural gas that's produced by the oil field is now, almost all of it is used for existing production purposes. There could be a possibility of obtaining natural gas from adjacent oil fields, but primarily the energy for the steam generators would be utility gas. Other equipment that would be down here would be the H2S removal equipment, other accessory equipment. And the first oil well pod that would be developed, site number 1, is right here. As I indicated earlier, the project would install new pipelines to carry steam and produced oil and water. All of the pipelines would be above ground and predominantly would follow existing access roads. The produced oil would be sent via a existing pipeline to the ConocoPhillips pump station. It's located about 500 yards east of Highway 135. There's always a possibility that the pipeline, for some reason, for maintenance purposes, most likely, may be offline for a short period of time. And in that eventuality, we've done the environmental review of impacts that could result from the temporary use of trucks to haul oil off of the project site. It's been estimated that it would be about 17 trucks per day, or 35 or 34 average daily trips. With the changes to the project that Larry described earlier today, one of the changes has been that there would be no trucking during the phase 1 portion of the project. If there is going to be any trucking, it would only be during phase 2. Should the oil transportation pipeline become inoperable for a short period of time, the applicant is confident that they would have enough on-site storage to store the oil on-site until the pipeline was operational again, eliminating the need for trucking. Just to explore the trucking scenario a little bit more, trucks entering the site would travel southbound on Highway 101, make a right-hand turn onto an existing, it's a driveway off of Highway 101 and an existing oil field road to the project area. Trucks leaving the project site would take an existing oil field road to Graciosa Road, travel south to an existing driveway access to Highway 135, and then go north. A likely destination for the trucks taking the oil off of the project site would be to continue going up Highway 135 to Clark Avenue, across Clark Avenue to the ConocoPhillips Santa Maria station. Another potential location would be to continue going up Highway 1 to Napomo. But once again, that could only happen with the phase 2 portion of the project. The environmental review that was prepared for the project was a mitigated negative declaration. There were a number of potential environmental impacts that were identified. Aesthetics could result primarily from views of the proposed tanks. Primarily, the ones of primary concern would be the ones closest to Graciosa Ridge. And as you can see in some photos I'll have in a minute, it's very unlikely that the tanks would be very visible, and we have proposed some mitigation measures that would require those tanks or all of the structures associated with the project to be painted a dark color, further reducing their visibility. Another aesthetic issue that has been associated with this project is nighttime lighting. So we have a mitigation measure, condition of approval, that would require that all existing lighting at the project site and all proposed lighting be low intensity and oriented to the south, away from the Orcutt community. The air quality issues that were identified by the MND were primarily dust from construction, nuisance dust. Mitigation measures were provided for that. Biological resources were primarily related to sensitive plants, oak trees, and other plants. Mitigation measures for those are primarily through avoidance, fencing the sensitive plants, and monitoring during construction. Fire protection impacts would be the mitigation measure for fire protection would be to amend the existing fire protection plan that would address issues like access and fire flows. Hazardous materials was the event that contaminated soil is found during site construction, that remediation be provided. Transportation and circulation issues, again, this would be a phase 2 issue with truck transportation, and the applicant would be required to comply with Caltrans requirements for ingress, egress, and the water resources impacts would be related primarily to construction-related impacts. This is some representative views of the project area from surrounding areas. This is from East Rice Ranch Road. There is an existing tank that is barely visible there. It's been painted a dark color. Again, it is not a highly visible piece of equipment. The new proposed equipment would be located in that area. This is a view from Highway 1, and again, you can barely make out some existing equipment. It appears to be lighter in color with the proposed mitigation measures for darker colors. Again, very low visibility. The draft mitigated negative declaration was circulated for public review. We received several comments from agencies. Division of Oil and Gas and Geothermal Resources wanted to be sure that the document indicated that they are a responsible agency. Regional Water Quality Control Board had some questions about possible water quality impacts associated with steam injection. City of Santa Maria had some concerns about truck transportation. Larry has gone over the APCD issues regarding thresholds, and Caltrans had some concerns regarding truck ingress, egress. As outlined in your staff report, it was determined that the proposed project would be consistent with the applicable policies of the county's comprehensive plan. The project site is not located within the boundaries of the Orcutt Community Plan. And so finally, staff would recommend that your commission adopt the required findings for the project specified in Attachment A of your staff report, including the Sequa findings, and as the proposed findings have been modified by staff today. Secondly, staff recommends that your commission approve the mitigated negative declaration as revised by staff today and adopt the mitigation monitoring program contained in the conditions of approval. And lastly, approve phase 1 of the oil drilling and production plan subject to conditions of approval included in Attachment B of your staff report and as modified by the memo that you received today. So that concludes my presentation, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you. Commissioner Boyson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Rodriguez. I realize that we're not approving it today because phase 1 doesn't include the potential of transporting truck, oil by truck. But when I read through the conditions, I didn't really see that there was a specific restriction on how temporary truck transportation could be for the future. Are you going to address that when you bring back phase 2, or it looks like
yeah, Commissioner Boyson, no time limits were placed on that. And the history of the project site has indicated that when trucking has occurred, the last time apparently was in 2000 for a couple of days when the pipeline was down for maintenance. It's a very rare occurrence, and it is the applicant's primary project objective is to use the pipeline transportation.
And I guess I go back to what our discussion was earlier today, that we're having all these projects. Geez, if you don't put it down as a specific condition, all of a sudden 10, 12 years from now, all of a sudden we're running trucks out of there every day. That, Mr. Apple, it looked like you were.
I was just going to add to that. We're clear at this point for what needs to be done today that there would be absolutely no trucking of this newly produced oil from phase 1. one of the major factors that's come up has been some late hits from Caltrans, where they've indicated that they would want deceleration lanes and acceleration lanes on Highway 101, and those would be extremely expensive for the rare times that they would even have to consider doing something like this. So I'm feeling at this point is that when we bring this back to you, we could have stronger wording if you wanted that in there, but it does not appear that the applicant is willing to make those changes necessary to even be able to truck Phase 1 or Phase 2 product.
Okay, well, maybe we can discuss before we get through, but we'll see what everybody has to say.
Thank you. Commissioner Cooney.
Just to agree with Commissioner Boyson, when I hear about the possibility of additional truck traffic on Clark Avenue, I really shiver, because that has such a future of intense traffic problems. Anything we can do to avoid that is going to be better for the community. So I want to signal early and often that if there's a way to ensure pipeline transportation of the new oil, we ought to be working in that direction. And if there are exceptions, we'll have to come up with specific traffic paths to be followed by the trucks that minimize the impact on the neighborhoods.
Thank you. Commissioner Brown.
Thank you. Speaking of neighborhoods, was there any public interest, either through phone calls or letters, on the draft ND?
Commissioner Brown, the only responses that we received were from the state and county agencies.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Rodriguez, the project uses 635 acre-feet of water from its own sources. It takes it, uses it, and re-injects it in through this percolation process or whatever, spreading fields. Is that water contaminated again and goes through a filtering process, or is the water clean when it goes back down into the ground? Do you know?
Yeah. Commissioner Valencia, the water is brine water. Mm-hmm. It's filtered, cleaned up, used for steam generation. How many times they may recycle it through the steam generator, I don't have an answer to that. Ultimately, the water would be disposed through injection wells back into the deep aquifers where it was originally obtained.
Oh, okay, so there's no contamination of the fields. All right, thank you very much. And with that, we'll go to the applicant.
Mr. Chair,
yes.
Before you do that, if I could just make an additional comment about why we're proposing the commission to just act on Phase 1 and how we're proposing to get to your action on Phase 2. As the staff indicated, we inadvertently used an APCD threshold where we should have been using the county's threshold. The APCD threshold for reactive hydrocarbons and NOx is 240 pounds per day. The county's threshold is 25. The way that we're proposing to remedy this is to take a revision to our thresholds to the Board of Supervisors as an interim revision. Our feeling is that if the air APCD, who is really in charge of monitoring and protecting the air resources of the County of Santa Barbara, feels that the 240 pounds per day threshold is the appropriate threshold, that the county ought to follow suit. So we will be setting for hearing a discussion, setting for hearing on September 12th, hopefully for a discussion on the 26th with the Board of Supervisors, a revision to that interim to the threshold on an interim basis. The reason it's interim is because our county's thresholds of significance and Sequa guidelines dictate a public review process for permanent changes or permanent new thresholds that includes a 30-day review process and public workshops before the Planning Commission. And because this could affect other projects, it seems like it's something we need to fix more quickly, and then we'll go through and fix it on a more permanent basis, a little more leisurely. So that's one path. If the Board of Supervisors determines that that's an appropriate interim change to the threshold, then we'll bring the project back before your commission, essentially with the analysis that's before you today, and be able to approve recommend that the commission approve the project. If the board chooses not to do that for some reason, and it'll be a public hearing, so we don't know what evidence might be introduced, then we will be revising the environmental document. The applicant is committed to doing air quality offsets in any event, and will recirculate that and bring it back after recirculation to your commission. So I think either way we have a solution. Our preference is to move forward with a change in the air quality thresholds. We'll see how that goes. But I just wanted you to know, because this issue may come up as you hear from the applicant and any other members of the public that are going to testify.
Okay, so that has to do with the statements on page 11 concerning the Santa Barbara County APCD.
Right.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right. And with that, did you want to make a comment before we went?
No, I just had one more question of staff, and that was the slide that you had of views. Any new structures that will go up on the site, will they be taller than what was depicted?
Commissioner Brown, the tallest structure, it would be 32 feet. That's a tank. There are tanks out there now that are taller than 32 feet.
And do you know how tall the structures were on the slide?
I don't have those. That was a fairly large tank, so it was at least 30.
Perhaps the applicant can answer that. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And Mr. Deacon, who will be making the presentation?
Good, thank you. Commissioners, Chairman Valencia, thanks for hearing our application. I'm very happy to be here. I'd like to thank the staff for a great presentation. Did a very good job, very complete in what we're looking at. And I'd really like to introduce Brightburn Energy to the commission. We're fairly new to the county. And as a part of that, I'd introduce our technical staff, some of what we do. And I'll try to minimize what we're doing with our project, because you've heard a very detailed look at what it actually is right now. Before I get to some of our key technical and operations staff.
We need your name and title for the report, please.
Sorry, thank you. Chris Williamson, Vice President of Operations for Brightburn Energy Company. Good, and before I introduce a few of our key technical staff, I'd like to introduce Hal Washburn, co-founder and co-CEO of Brightburn Energy, just for a brief minute.
All right. Mr. Washburn.
Thank you, Chris. I'm Hal Washburn. I'm co-founder and CEO of Brightburn Energy. Thank you all for having us here today. We are relatively new to the Santa Maria area, but we do consider the Santa Maria Basin one of our core operating areas. This will be a long-term place that we intend to do business. We're very excited about that. We pride ourselves in being very proactive and very valuable members of any community that we operate in, and we look forward to continuing that tradition here in Santa Maria. We focus on technology. We focus on using new technologies to extract more oil and gas out of existing oil and gas fields. We strive to maintain the highest environmental standards while at the same time producing much needed California energy, oil, and jobs. We think that this project is a perfect example of that philosophy, in that we are using new technology, producing new California energy, and we're producing new local jobs. With that, I'll turn it back over to Chris Williamson, but thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Washburn. Mr. Williamson.
Thank you. You've been given a list of both my presentation and a list of our team members, a listing with some of the experience levels of these individuals. Just like to point out a couple of them that will be well involved in our project. Reservoir engineers, Dr. Dennis Growing and Dr. Bill Fong, who are here with us today. A lot of experience, PhDs, many years in the oil industry. Tom Myers, our California Division Manager, who also directly oversees the ORCUT operations. Our Geological Manager, John Kiespert, who is also here, and well involved in identifying exactly where these wells need to go. Our project manager here, Mike Tolbert, who lives in ORCUT now, will be here for a few years to come. Very good. And we also have several environmental consultants here that have worked our project. John Deacon, who is our agent, Marianne Strange on the air pollution side, and especially a couple of the key people here, Phil Hosh, our field foreman, who's lived in ORCUT for a long time. Some of you may know him. And a couple of our lead operators are here, Ruben Perez and, do we have Bruce Longus here? Bruce. Bruce is here too. Great. They're our lead operators in the oil field, and they're responsible for actually, making sure that all the oil comes out of the ground and it comes out the right way. So they're good. Thank you guys for being here. To introduce Brightburn. Brightburn is a independent oil producer, large independent in the state of California. Our roots are really in the Los Angeles Basin. We have a picture here of the Los Angeles Basin with our fields highlighted in orange as we spread through the area. And one of the real things that we've discovered and experienced over time is that we have been and needed to be very responsive to the community needs and local needs in the areas around our oil fields. We are unlike Exxon. We're not thousands of miles away, and so you can talk to us. Feel free to call us anytime. We'll be happy to answer questions that we can, all the way up to the co-CEO of the company. We're also not like other oil companies or some other oil companies, unnamed, who don't necessarily respect the environment in their oil operations. We do respect the environment. And we've operated in very sensitive areas here in the LA Basin. A few of those areas that we've operated in, if we can peek in the city of Brea, we've got some of our oil wells that are actually directly adjacent to housing, kind of an unusual place. Again, a very sensitive type area. But what we've developed is a very proactive approach to safety, environmental issues with what we do. We implement programs that maintain a safe working environment, again, with significant respect for the local areas where we work, and also maximizing the use of technology. If you were to look at this, you wouldn't generally think of that as an oil well, but we've got an oil well here inside the fence. We've got a soundproof surface pump there in the little enclosure. The neighbors next door can't even hear it. Never gotten a complaint from them about our facility here. We have a record of safe and responsible environmental operations. And again, being in the urban environment, a couple of the other places we operate are in the city of Los Angeles. This facility is a block outside of Beverly Hills. When we first bought the facility in 1993, the wall was not this tall. The drilling rig, which is behind the bell tower, the decorative bell tower there, was not there. We operated with a diesel production rig. We had restricted hours of operations. We could not drill or re-drill on the site. Through the redevelopment of the site, we took it, we extended the wall, we built soundproof enclosures on the inside, so all the deliveries of pipe and such are inside a soundproof building. The drilling rig that we put in is all electric, so there's no diesel operations on the location. Significantly improved the aesthetics of the area compared to our original operation, or the operation as it existed when we acquired the property, and significantly reduced the impacts to the neighbors. We actually do have residents that live 60 feet away from this wall, just on the other side of this picture. Again, we've minimized that operation, maximized the recovery from the oil field with the addition of drilling. We can drill at night without even being heard. And while, yes, we are making extra money from this, the environmental impact reduction that we implemented here has been very great. The neighbors love us here too. One of the other places we operate is in the Seal Beach oil field. This is on an island in the National Wildlife Refuge at the Naval Weapons Station. Doesn't really get much more sensitive than that. But we've operated there. That was really the first core property that Brightburn purchased in 1989. At our East Coyote oil field in the city of Fullerton, we have oil operations, again, adjacent to housing, actually very expensive housing here, multi-million-dollar housing, and we're on a golf course. You can see our pumping units next to fairways, over a green, up the hill from some of the places. And again, we've got some wells and facilities adjacent to where the houses are, bordering the golf course. And one of the things we can do to help blend in, you see when you paint the units dark green in a particular place that's all green, you don't hardly see them. I guess one of the other keys of you don't have to show the slide again, but one of the other keys of that particular operation, we also have a gnatcatcher habitat that runs adjacent to the oil field and the golf course there that it exists. The Orcutt Hill field, the Orcutt oil field, it's been producing oil for over 100 years. It's been a founding part of the community of Orcutt, of course, named for the geologist that discovered the field. That field, along with many others in the county, are key fields in the development of Santa Barbara County. They've been very helpful. Orcutt's produced almost 200 million barrels of oil in the county. Cat Canyon, Cuyama, and Santa Maria Valley are all fields that have produced over 100 million barrels of oil, key to the county's growth. And I guess one other point just to make, 100 years ago, more people lived on the hill than lived in the flatlands. So it's been, again, key to the county, and we still provide a lot of benefits to the county, jobs, tax revenue, and the like. Specific to the project, and I'd like to point out the overall oil field here. We've got the field boundary, about 10,000 acres total in the field, and on the hill. Again, our operations are on the northern part of the field. The project site that we're proposing is in the center of the oil field here. Key roadways, again, Highway 101, Highway 135. Pine Grove School is actually located right here. It's actually inside the oil field boundary that the DOG recognizes, if you can believe that. And again, Clark Avenue, the main thoroughfare that's been discussed, east-west, just north of the oil field. What we're requesting, the staff explained very well, we're using only 5 acres of the surface in the oil field for an enhanced oil recovery project. We're utilizing state-of-the-art technology, environmentally friendly and proven, to inject steam down 96 wells, up to 96 wells. First phase would only be 32 wells, additional wells, for revitalizing the oil field. Again, the project location, again, on the hilltop, or near the hilltop here. The tallest tank that has been in the field that Commissioner Brown referenced, it's 35 or 40 feet tall and is actually located right up here above the office building. And that's the one thing that is visible now from the homes to the north or sites to the north. The next tallest tank that we're proposing would be a 32-foot tall tank in the first phase, which would be in the bottom end of the tank farm area. The first phase of the project would really only incorporate this area of the hill, the Pod 1 location, the facilities location with the water plants, and then the Pod 2 location, again, all on already disturbed areas. They mentioned the lighting. Lighting's going to be changed and modified so it really doesn't have an impact. And of course, there's no new pipeline routes, but also no new trucking routes required for this. We won't truck in the first phase of the project. We don't believe we'll truck in the second phase either. We've got existing pipelines that have plenty of capacity to carry all of our crude oil off the hill to the oil distribution systems that exist north of Santa Maria. The location on the first pod, and we call them pods because we're going to drill a number of wells from one site. They'll go out at an angle to get to where the locations need to be in the subsurface. But on the surface, you won't see a whole lot. You'll see a row of wells. We'll have about 16 wells on this location. This existing well is kind of what it's going to look like. We'll have some valves on top, a flow line coming off. We'll have a header system that will allow the steam to be distributed to any well and the oil to flow back from those wells to anything else. Again, no surface pumping equipment is required for the process. It's a very clean operation, and it looks very good. Again, this is one of the locations. The wells will be, 16 wells will be located more or less in a straight line down the center of this, and they'll be about 8 feet apart from well to well. One of the real keys, and I want to make sure I mention this, the real key technology boost for this project is our use of the existing oil field water. Again, this is brine water that comes from the oil field. It's produced out of our oil zones and re-injected into the oil zones to enhance oil recovery. We're taking that water using a state-of-the-art reclamation and desalination system called VSEP, which is a vibratory shear enhanced processing unit, which utilizes multiple membranes to separate all the salt and contaminants from the water so you can use it to generate steam. Steam generation water needs to be very clean water. It's like distilled water, essentially. utilizing that water and then re-injecting it into our formation. Again, we will not use any local water source, county, state, groundwater or anything else for this project. And that's really key. That's probably one of the most significant technology improvements in the steam recovery operation business in the oil fields in the last 15 or 20 years. Of course, our project doesn't have a lot of impact because we're in the existing operations on top of the hill. We won't really impact our agricultural operations at all that we have on the hill. Cattle will still graze. And then the real key benefits of our project, we've got the construction activities, first phase, second phase. We'll take a few months on the first phase, second phase, a year or more coming down the road. Again, additional construction jobs. We'll be hiring more people to work up on the hill, at least a half a dozen for the operations as we see it with this, and it could grow. Property taxes are going to increase. I may not have mentioned it earlier, but we'll roughly double the production from the oil field. Right now we generate about $625,000 in county tax revenue, and we'll probably double that to over $1 million. Any other keys? Less foreign oil, less offshore oil. I know that's a key indicator in Santa Barbara County. We'd like to see less of that, more from onshore. And again, we will not impact the local water basin. Just won't happen. On the hill, all of our water comes from the producing zones. All of it will go back into the producing zones where there's oil production currently. And with that, I'd like to thank you for allowing me to make the presentation. I'd like to thank the county staff for everything they've done and bringing this to where we are today. I'd like to add that I think we have a lot of supporters out here, and I wasn't going to ask all of them to talk at all, but if all our supporters could stand up maybe and just show. A lot of these folks are local folks in the community, and again, we'd really like to see this happen. It's a big benefit, win-win, win for Brightburn, win for Orcutt, win for the county. It's a great project, and we'd like to see it come through, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Yes, Mr. Williamson, there was one guy way in the back corner that didn't stand up. Was that?
Okay, Rock, why didn't you stand up?
All right. Thank you very much. Let's see, do we have any questions on the, I don't think anybody has any questions.
Great. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. All right. And with that, what's the wish of the Planning Commission? We have about 30-some minutes of public testimony, or we could go to lunch and hear them after lunch. What's that?
Let's go ahead and take them while they're here.
And
then they
all right.
Yeah.
Bob Hatch, open the public hearing.
You know your audience, Ms. Brown. I appreciate you taking the testimony before lunch. I am Bob Hatch. I'm the President and Chief Executive Officer of the Santa Maria Valley Chamber of Commerce. I'm also the Chairman of Santa Maria Valley Economic Development Commission. Given with the original program that was going to be presented to you today, I understand the procedural limitations, and so I'm going to scale back my remarks somewhat and reserve some of that information for future hearings, given with you're going to be addressing Phase 1 only today. I have read the staff report and appreciate the project information. I also appreciate the applicants taking their valuable time to visit my office and brief me on this project, and they understand that we understand this technology, so we didn't spend a lot of time on that. This is something that we're very interested in, also pointing back to the Santa Maria Pacific's operations out in that general vicinity. It is important that this technology be allowed to continue to advance. The impacts on the environment, the use of existing roads and pipeline routes are something that are very important to us. Again, we've supported the use of the steam generators in previous applications, and we do so again here today, and in the hopes that we'll revitalize the oil field industry in the valley. It's been alluded to again by the applicant, the number of jobs it will create. The revenues to the county are extremely important in this day and age, especially in the North County. Again, I would urge you to support the entire project, but in in understanding the procedural limitations. I would urge you to support what you can today and allow us to make further testimony when the time is allowed. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Hatch. Thomas Gibbons, followed by Rock Zimmerman.
Chair Valencia, Commissioners, my name is Thomas Gibbons. I'm here today to support this project. It's a good project. It's a logical extension of 100 years of good stewardship up on Orchid Hill. I want to echo the comments. The staff report is great. The applicant did a great job. There's no reason to belate a lot of the issues. It's significant that the project is outside the area and the jurisdiction of WADO 2, and they're not going to use fresh water. They're going to produce their own. There's really, I couldn't think of any global or specific reason that anyone could have an issue with this project. With that, I urge you to move ahead and let the applicant get it on his way.
Thank you very much, Mr.
Thank you,
Gibbons.
sir.
Rock Zimmerman, followed by Andy Caldwell.
Good morning, members. Rock Zimmerman, California Independent Petroleum Association, headquartered in Sacramento. Prior to that, 22-year resident, 4850 Crestwood Court in Orchid, so it's good to be home. SIPA represents oil and gas producers in California, royalty owners, and service and supply companies. A lot of folks don't realize how much oil is actually produced in the state of California, about 750,000 barrels a day. But that production is rapidly declining, whereas 10 years ago, you had about 50% or over 50% of our in-state needs produced here in California. We have about 39% today, and it's rapidly decreasing. And the only alternative to in-state domestic production is tankering in from foreign countries. There are no interstate pipelines. You can't get it from the Gulf or from Texas, and the Alaskan North Slope can't be ramped up. So therefore, you have to go out and tanker it in, which has its own problems, and that's why in-state production is so key. And obviously, from tankering in, you don't get the residual benefits of job creation, tax revenues, and of course, our companies reinvest their revenues into the state of California, creating more jobs and better economic opportunities for folks. So you have an opportunity with this project to allow an operator with a strong history of production in California to create jobs, create tax revenues, and help California meet its energy needs, and we urge its support.
Thank you very much. Andy Caldwell, followed by Tim Christ.
Chairman Valencia, members of the Commission, I am Andy Caldwell representing CoLab. First of all, I don't know if all of you know this. I know that Commissioner Brown does. I'm a member of the Process Improvement Team Oversight Committee, and I want to commend your staff. It is remarkable that we've got an oil project with a mitigated negative deck here, and I think that's very important, because the bottom line is, if I could draw your attention to pages 6 and 7 of the staff report. It'll be too hard to point this out, but I just want to point out some language. Under the section oil wells, it talks about that this area was previously graded. Under the section of steam generation, it's previously cleared area with existing access roads. Under water use, existing pipelines. Under natural gas use, existing utility connection. Under the tank battery, previously cleared area. The bottom line is, as most of us that have been in this area a long time know, Orchid Hill is oil, and that's what we do around here, to paraphrase from a Firestone Brewery commercial. It's what we do, and the fact that this is not going to disturb anything and only use 5 acres of an existing 10,000 acre site, we think this is a project as close as you can get to the Blue Ribbon Commission's recommendation for low impact oil projects to increase revenue and create jobs in our community. The bottom line, the oil industry is an extremely important part of the North County's economy. It has been for 100 years, and it was on its deathbed And this project is one of those projects on the horizon that speaks of reinvestment and a reinvigoration. And the jobs produced by the oil industry are the best paying jobs that the North County has. There's a number of people with nothing more than a high school education making $70,000 to $100,000 a year in this industry. We need these jobs. There's a lot of ancillary jobs via the multiplier effect that are created. The environmental impact, as we know, mitigated neg deck, there aren't any. And so the point is we just think that this deserves your full support, and we hope that it would go forward. And maybe we need to talk to the APCD board as to why it couldn't all be approved today, because we thought based on the language in the staff report it should have been, but we'll defer that to another time. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. Tim Christ, followed by Carl Engel.
Chairman, members of the board, for those of you that aren't familiar with me, I'm the owner of Kenai Drilling, and we're a local oil and gas well drilling contractor. We have over a 40-year history here in Santa Maria, and we're headquartered in the Cat Canyon area. We live in Santa Maria, and we've chosen to raise our families here. We've grown to a size of 280 employees, and we operate throughout the state. We operate both offshore and onshore throughout the state of California. And we drill hundreds of wells every year. And we're an industry leader in sensitive and environmentally critical drilling areas. Matter of fact, we just finished this week a project in Newport Beach. And we've looked at this project closely, and being a drilling contractor in today's oil industry is kind of an anomaly. There were 32 of us in California in 1982, now there's 5 of us left. The good side of that is we get to choose who we work for. Not only the projects that we work on, but the customers that we work for. And unfortunately, we've passed on a lot of projects the last couple of years because we didn't feel that the customer was going to be a good steward of the environment and that they were going to operate in a manner that we wanted to be associated with. With Brightburn Energy, I've known many of the principals, and we've performed operations with them in other areas of the state for about 15 years. And the management and the staff have proven themselves to be of the highest moral and ethical character in all of their business dealings and also in dealing with the community. And having said that, when they came to Santa Maria as a resident of Orchid, I was happy to see them take over that property because we knew we would have a good, sound company that was actually going to be good for the community. When we decided to partner with them, they chose us as the drilling contractor. We looked at the project, and we're very familiar with sensitive areas. We also operate in Beverly Hills. We've been on 4 platforms in the Santa Barbara Channel this year, so we're very, very familiar with ways to mitigate the impact, not only environmentally, but also on the other residences. So based upon that, we're happy about this project. It's kind of nice to have some of our people working locally versus Sacramento or LA or the Bakersfield area. They'll be glad that they don't have to drive as far to work. It's going to be good for the economy, and I'm in full support of it. And also, since you guys aren't familiar with the folks at Brightburn, I have a long history with them, and I can tell you that in our industry they're very well respected, and based upon their past history, I'm a huge advocate, and I would encourage you to approve their application and to jump on Andy's bandwagon also, that if you could improve it all at one time, that would be more beneficial to the process, and it also would probably be a lot easier on us as taxpayers of the county. It would take less money to get this project going and get more dollars back into the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Carl Engel, followed by George Pierce, and I agree with you, they have nice people. Phil Hosch and John Deacon are been crossing paths with them for about 6 or 7 years on projects like this.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Carl Engel, second-generation business owner. Our company, Engel & Gray, has worked for many, many years in the oil industry in this valley. We're celebrating 60 years this year as a second-generation oil person, I would guess you'd say. As I reviewed the project that Brightburn has before you, again, I think it's one of those projects that's it's a Class A project, environmentally sound. From the days when I grew up and went up that Orchid Hill, things have drastically changed. You're looking for every little bush that might be, need to be protected or whatever, and it's something to behold today. When you go up and see little red flags all over the place, you know that there's something important there, and they don't disturb it. Brightburn has been very good at being a steward of the hill, and I would fully support you backing their project today and giving them the negative deck. We thank you for your support.
Thank you, Mr. Engel. George Pierce.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, I have no strong feelings either way on this project. But I want to say something about the comments that one of your planners made here earlier. There was no letters from anybody in the public. The reason why is because nobody in the public knew what was happening. Even first I knew was reading the newspaper headline this morning. Even Penelope Hartnell, who, as you know, Hartnell #1 is Old Maud, owns property right here adjacent, called me at 8 o'clock this morning, wanting to know what's going on. Somebody needs to get a handle on the public noticing from planning and development. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, with that, close the public hearing. We'll bring it back to the Planning Commission. The commission want to discuss it in length or go to lunch or ready for a motion? It's very small what we're doing. Phase 1. Yes.
I would just
Commissioner
as soon complete this
All
before
right.
lunch, so I think it's going to be only a couple
All right.
minutes here.
All right, we're back to, did the staff have any comments to add? No? We'll bring it back to the commission. Commissioner Brown?
I would like to pick up from what Mr. Pierce's comment concerning noticing. Can you address that, Mr.
Sure.
Apple, please?
Normal noticing for negative declaration is 300 feet, but because of the remoteness of this, we went 1,000 feet, and we were able to pick up some of the newer developments to the south, the Rice Ranch project. The master distribution list, which we normally use, that identify which state agencies and other responsible agencies are involved, was something that I filled out. I did miss sending this to the Orchid Area Advisory Group, and for that I apologize. I did speak with Mrs. Hartnell this morning. Her main concern was truck traffic going through her ranching area, and I assured her that the revisions to the project included a no trucking condition, which she was very happy to hear. And I'll be sending her a copy of the staff report as well. So that was an oversight not going to the Orchid Area Advisory Group. That's kind of a normal thing that we would do for this, but it was oversight, and I take responsibility for that.
All right, thank you.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair. Was there any notice in the paper at all?
There's always a legal notice in the paper and the legal ads, but you have to read the legal ads for that.
Okay.
Thank you. Commissioner Boyson.
Yeah, the only reason that we're, I shouldn't say the only reason, but the primary reason that we're seeing this is because of the potential impacts to the Lompoc Yerba Santa. Otherwise, this could have been a land use permit, isn't that correct? And would have only been seen by a subject to an appeal.
Commissioner Boyson, that is true. It's also would have been subject to environmental review.
Right.
But the permit would have been a land use permit.
Yes. So, yeah, I think that we do have a history with these sort of projects. I mean, we did approve Santa Maria Pacific project, which I realize may be a little different technology, but I think that obviously this is up, as Mr. Gibbons said, this just is a proper extension of a 100-year-old project. And this is what is done on Orchid Hill, is produce oil. And if we can squeeze out some more oil at $72 a barrel or whatever oil is today, then more power to them. I did want to, when I saw Rock Zierman up here, Rock graduated from high school with my daughter, and I didn't realize he graduated at 25 years old, because I don't feel like I've aged as old as he appeared to me today, but I guess that he has. It certainly, I think, as all of the speakers have said, this is certainly a project that would get support from virtually everyone within the Santa Maria Valley. It provides jobs. It provides a very necessary service and necessary production of oil for our needs. The only thing that I would like to make sure is that we nail down how temporary trucking is when we come back for phase 2. If I'd be prepared to approve this project. I think that we've got this little minor hiccup with the APCD, but if our director, our assistant director tells us that we can't do it today, then we can't do it today, and that's fine with me. But when it does come back, I would like to see some sort of language that would just identify that the trucking operations would be of a very temporary nature, and that the and providing us with some very specific routes for transporting that oil. But that would be, I think, my only comment on here. And the other, let's go, more power to them. Let's get the people hired and go forward with this.
Thank you. Commissioner Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I'm certainly in favor of the project, and what I think is interesting, Mr. Caldwell mentioned that the Blue Ribbon Commission had encouraged low-impact oil projects, and I always thought that was sort of an oxymoron, low-impact oil projects. Well, I live on the South Coast, so you know that none of us think that oil projects are low-impact, but having been to the site, I think this is pretty low-impact. I appreciate the stewardship of the environment by the company. I was most impressed to see all those little flags protecting the Urba Santa among the pipelines. I hadn't ever seen that before. But I was quite impressed by the site and what they're trying to accomplish, and I appreciate much of the company being here this morning. I think that's great to show your commitment to the project and to the community. So I'm fully supportive of this and be voting for it, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Cooney.
I have the same background as Commissioner Brown in terms of a skepticism about oil operations, and for that reason I try and scrutinize anything that comes before us very carefully to identify what issues might be raised by a particular proposal. Sometime back we approved a similar proposal for re-injecting the field near Casmalia, and being familiar with that area, I was comfortable that the potential for environmental impact was minimized, though there we did have truck traffic as an issue, and it was a big concern. Here it would appear that closer to a larger population, the potential impact would be greater, and it makes me a little nervous to think that this kind of project with this potential for impact on the community could have been approved by staff without some public hearing at all. I'm going to look at that and see exactly why that's the case, why this is not a conditional use subject to the closest of public review. However, in this case, it would appear that many others in the community, if they knew all we know now, would be supportive. To ensure that, I'm pleased that we have a second opportunity in this case, and would encourage staff to go further than our codes require in terms of noticing perhaps repeat notices in newspapers of general circulation to make sure that all those who live in the area that could be affected by truck traffic or other impacts have an opportunity to appear before us. So I'm absolutely in support of the project in general, and specifically for Phase 1. Look forward to these last issues being tied down in Phase 2.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Cooney. And we heard both comments from both ends of the spectrum here. I'm glad that we'll get Phase 1 done. Phase 2 should come to us in 4 to 6 weeks. Probably 2 months. All right, fine. And with that, I won't belabor the project. The motion has been modified. And so with that, I'll make a motion, since it's a 4th District item, that we accept staff recommendation as modified at this meeting. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, thank you. Any further discussion? Ms. Mendoza, would you call the roll?
Commissioner Boyson?
Aye.
Commissioner Brown?
Aye.
Commissioner Cooney?
Aye.
Commissioner Valencia?
Aye.
Vote carries 4-0.
All right, and with that, the Planning Commission will take a short break for lunch, and we'll return at 1:20. Center, and it's in the afternoon. We're on item number 5, Articles 2 and 3, the General Height Regulation Ordinance Amendment. Ms. Valera, would you read that into the record, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hearing on request of Planning and Development Department to consider case number 06 ORD 7 and 06 ORD 8, proposing amendments to the coastal and inland zoning ordinances, Articles 2 and 3.
Thank you very much. Any ex parte or site visit of any sort or anything? Not. Mr. Anthony?
Mr. Chair and members of the Commission, good afternoon. We're here today to fix what we believe to be a glitch in our zoning ordinances, our coastal and inland zoning ordinances, that became quite apparent in the recent release and public review of the zoning ordinance reformatted draft. And so I'm happy to report to you that that process has given us some good results, in that we're able to identify some inconsistencies in the ordinance that have been there, and come forward and fix those. Today, what we're focused on is consideration of whether the county should allow limited exceptions to applicable height limits. These exemptions would apply to specific structures and equipment that, by their very function, must exceed these height limits to be able to operate at all. Your recommendation of these limited exceptions would correct this inconsistency in both the coastal and inland zoning ordinances. So let me explain what the issue is. On the one hand, our two ordinances have height limitations, which you're very well aware of in each of the zone districts. What you might not be as clearly aware of is that in the general regulation section of each ordinance, there is also a general height limitation of 50 feet. It reads rather the same for both. It reads like this. I have highlighted a few things like elevator and stair housings, oil and gas derricks, and wind turbines, and similar structures may be up to 50 feet in height in all zone districts, unless they're, of course, in an airport zone. On the other hand, we have a number of things that our zoning ordinances enable, a number of land uses that comprise structures that exceed 50 feet in height. Let's take a look. You're all familiar with the drill rigs. This is a typical type of drill rig. They're not always this tall. Sometimes they may be taller. That temporarily occupy onshore oil and gas fields when they're drilling new wells. There's also a workover rig that will come in. It's going to be more of a mobile-based, a wheel-based mobile rig that will come in to service these wells through their life and to plug and abandon them at the end of their life. Give you another view. We have here a very tall one, 180 feet. This is the Molino Gas Project, which you all might remember, was just east of Gaviota. It was used to reach offshore gas reserves, though they came up dry hole. And you remember the former Gaviota gas plant. I show this one only because this is the better pictures we have. We have a similar gas processing plant in Las Flores Canyon. We also have them up northeast of Lompoc. They have various types of columns that are used to fractionate natural gas liquids into components like propane and butane. They also have gas flares to safely vent gas in emergency situations, and oftentimes these need to be high so that they're dispersed well into the atmosphere and don't create hotspot issues. There's another view of the Gaviota plant. We also have, very close to Lompoc, a diatomaceous processing plant. Now, this is not it. This is an example, a picture that they did send me from Mexico, but they tell me that their plant looks very similar to this structure. They have a number of structures, about 33 buildings, I believe it is, that exceed 50 feet in height, in some stacks. And that allows them to be able to perform their processing of the diatomaceous earth. We have concrete mix and asphalt mix silos, and they typically reach about as high as 75 feet. And as you can see on the left, they have about a 14-foot clearance here so that trucks can come and load periodically and take product away. And just to go back, when I say structures and equipment, we think sometimes as the conveyors can sometimes be thought of as equipment associated with the structure, the silo. And then, of course, you heard not too long ago a conceptual review hearing of the Lompoc Wind Energy Project. Now, we don't have any turbines to date, but we certainly are processing a proposal. And here, of course, they greatly exceed 50 feet in height. They can be as high as 490 feet to the top of the blade. And lastly, we have a pending application, and again, you heard this project in conceptual review for an ethanol plant. And this is an example of an ethanol plant. You can see that it too is going to involve silos and columns, stripper and distillation columns that will exceed 50 feet to be able to function at all. This is the narrow focus of our amendments today, to draw these exemptions. It would also clear up this inconsistency wherein our ordinance on the one hand enables certain things, certain types of facilities such as these. On the other hand, we're saying, but you can't be higher than 50 feet. Our obvious fix is to carve those out as specific exemptions. We have also offered up definitions so that those exemptions are clearly defined. Just to note, in our environmental review, it certainly dawned on us that height in and of itself does not necessarily determine whether or not there'll be a significant impact to visual resources. It is really going to depend on location. And I can draw you an example. You saw the Gaviota plant, and I think we would all agree there's a significant impact on visual resources on the Gaviota coast. But just to the east of that plant, we know we have another similar plant back in the canyon, Las Flores Canyon, to be precise. And because of its location, a structure or a land use with the similar heights does not present the same visual impact that one does depending on location. Sea Light Corporation's mining operation that you saw a similar facility from Mexico is a similar type of situation where it's back in a canyon area and it cannot be viewed from public viewing parts. We also note that 50 feet is not necessarily a determinant of whether or not it's an impact. If it's in a bad location, in a view shed of popular viewing, 49 feet, 30 feet may be an impact. And if it's hidden well, 75 feet, 100 feet will not be an impact.
I'd like to close by simply noting that we have purposefully chosen a very narrow focus so that we can make this a quick fix and move it through the process without a lot of ado. Had we expanded the scope, and there were some requests from members of the public to do so, that likely would have required us to do expanded environmental review and public outreach. So we have done that. But in so doing, we have also included a statement of intention in the findings that we would ask you to recommend to the Board of Supervisors. That does not in any way, in your adoption of these particular amendments, prohibit or bias any future consideration of any other type of structures or proposals that may come in to exceed height limits or in certain zone districts. So that's, I'm going to make my presentation very brief, but I'm certainly available for any questions you may have.
Do you have any updates or any corrections?
Oh, I do. Thank you very much for reminding me. My apologies on the numbering of the staff report on Section 5. My fault, I jumped from Section 5.1 to 5.4. There is no 5.2, 5.3, and 5.4 should have read 5.2. And I has also included, oh, and I forgot to pass out, we were going so fast, the slideshow. And I'll do that right now. If you would turn to the last page, on the first page of the resolution in attachment 1, the first paragraph in the preambles, the reference to article, the reference should be made to both articles 1 and 2, I'm sorry, 2 and 3, both the coastal and inland zoning ordinances. And so I do recommend that we amend the resolution's preamble accordingly. David, would you like a page? It's the last page.
Okay, and with that, bring it back and Commissioner Cooney.
Question, Mr. Anthony. Since you're applying these ordinance changes to Article 2, has there been any discussion with staff of the Coastal Commission that leads you to believe this would be a concern to exempt these narrow categories?
Yes, I have, Chairman Valencia and Commissioner Cooney. And in fact, I have some early indication that they may consider this as a minor amendment. These are facilities in the coastal zone, just to keep in mind, we're talking about only the temporary drill rigs and about processing facilities such as been permitted and has been practiced in the past. They consider these facilities in some cases to be coastal dependent, but in any respect, they would need to be able to do so to support coastal dependent offshore development structures to be able to function at all.
All right, thank you very much. And with that, we'll bring it back and we'll take it and open the public hearing.
Mr. Chair, could I
Yes.
just ask Mr. Anthony a question?
Yes.
On the last page on the resolution, the first under 2A, the word AMINE, under the definitions, what does that mean?
This is the last page of the resolution?
No, let me see.
Sorry.
It's page, yeah, last page. Well, it's not the last page, it's the second to the last page.
I think it's in several places. It's amine, A-M-I-N-E.
What does that mean?
Oh, that's for cleaning up. That's it's a chemical solution or process that's used to neutralize the H2S in sour gas.
All right. Any further questions? All right, thank you very much, Mr. Anthony. And with that, we'll open the public hearing and we'll hear from Thomas Gibbons first. Mr. Gibbons? Followed by David White.
Chair Valencia, Commissioners, good afternoon. My name is Thomas Gibbon. Hasn't changed from this morning. Still from Santa Maria. Basically, as a practical application of height needs, I'm going to talk more in relation to the oil industry and the needs for no height restrictions on drilling rigs or portable rigs. I actually looked at the ordinances and the conditions in 58 counties, and it was nice to see that some counties don't have restrictions on portable rigs because they're temporary. They're almost ancillary to the process. Of course, an oil well or a gas well starts with a rig, and sometimes in its life it's serviced with a rig, but rigs are in short supply, and no one's going to leave it sit on a hole and let it stand up in the air. So as a practical matter, there's a good example is Kern County. Most of the counties that aren't really too worried about it because they've got many buildings that are much taller, like LA, Orange County, even Ventura County. I support the exemption. Some of the oil facilities, of course, require the height to develop the chemistry in a cracking tower or an amine facility, and it's just a limitation. If you don't have the height, the chemistry doesn't work, and knowing organic chemistry is pretty straight, the stuff doesn't come apart. I want to tell you that staff has worked directly with the oil industry, and there's been a lot of interaction, and it's really something that really just needs to look at the real side of the world and maybe match some numbers. That's a simplistic way of saying it, and it's a very complicated process of untangling regulations. But I want it said that I support the exemption, and that's the end of my comment.
All right, thank you very much,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Gibbons. David White, followed by Steve Kirby.
Chairman Valencia and Commissioners, my name is David White, representing Granite Construction Company. We are one of the 3 asphalt plant operators in Santa Barbara County, and we have a very strong support for this amendment because obviously facilities that have height as a natural industry standard type component to their configurations need to have some kind of allowance for those facilities. It's something we can't do business without being able to load our product into trucks which are well above ground, and as a result we end up with higher than typical structures that might be incurred in some other businesses. That's something that I think that the ordinance actually does well, and I have no issue with that at all. I would like to bring a question or a topic to the Commission, however, with regard to where this is applicable. In Santa Barbara County, all 3 of the asphalt facilities are on agriculturally zoned parcels where, if I'm not, please correct me if I'm not correct, I believe that that is a non-conforming use on all 3 facilities. They are grandfathered, they've been there for decades in most cases. But if we were to have to relocate one of those facilities because the mineral reserve was to become exhausted, we would potentially be looking at a strategically important commodity that has to be relocated, and then we'd be fighting this struggle against a non-conforming use. And what I would like to suggest is that you might consider at least some kind of a direction to staff where we might be able to resolve that as an allowed use, given that it's going to have to go through conditional use type permitting in a discretionary action anyway. It just makes no sense to me, since aggregate minerals are always, or 99% of the time, located on agriculturally zoned parcels, that we need to adjust our county planning so that we acknowledge the location of those materials, and that we're not having to fight something that is not an allowed use, given that it's going to be a discretionary process anyway.
We'll take that under note and look into that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. White. Steve Kirby. Mr. Kirby is representing the Satellite Corporation, makers of diatomaceous earth. Goes all over the world, and before you start, maybe someday you could set up a site visit for the Planning Commission and the staff. Cellite has been there for probably, what, 50, 100 years? And it would be something for this staff and commission to see. Please.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, I'm Steve Kirby, and yes, I'm sure my client would welcome the opportunity to have you visit the facility. It has been there. The operations started there about 100 years ago. And they are, as you might guess, constantly needing to change facilities to stay up with evolving environmental standards and to change process facilities just to remain competitive in a highly competitive market. It's been my experience, I've represented the company for more than 30 years, and been my experience that through the discretionary permit process under conditional use permit and final development plan procedures, and with the variance provisions in the ordinance, that one could get past the 50-foot height limitation. And indeed, we have a large number of facilities that exceed 50 feet. But then I understand that some years ago the county changed its interpretation and no longer believed that the ordinance as drafted would allow any exceedance of the 50-foot limitation unless there were specific exemptions. So when we learned of this and we were discussing with staff, we found out that there were a number of other types of facilities that needed that kind of relief. And staff was very responsive, and so I'm here today to say that we very strongly support this ordinance amendment and hope you will approve it and send it on to the Board of Supervisors.
All right, thank you very much. We have a question. Commissioner Cooney.
Mr. Kirby, I don't see how it's possible for you to have represented Cellite for 30 years. I thought we were about the same age.
We are. I'm sorry to remind you of that.
Thank you very much. All right, and with that, we'll close the public hearing, and we'll come back to the commission. Any comments made by Mr. White, Mr. Anthony? You'll work with Ms. Meester to try and, Ms. Black to try and give a response of some sort to Mr. White, I hope.
Mr. Chair, certainly, and Mr. White and I did speak earlier this week on the issue. And again, let me emphasize that in what we're trying to do here is a very narrowly focused fix, yes, with the intent of getting through quickly, so that we don't hang up a lot of projects like Sea Light's proposed upgrades. What Mr. White is proposing is something that Mr. Appleshop can consider, and it's basically when you have the processing plants that are associated with these mining operations that in the past have been permitted uses in the general industry and required that zoning, should there be some allowance with a conditional use permit that they also be permittable in Ag 2. And certainly that's something that staff can look at. I'll let Mr. Apple address that further if you like.
Mr. Apple?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I think the focus of the hearing today is to try to address a number of these height issues that have come up recently, right, and we wanted to just take care of that. Had we opened it up to address the specific issue Mr. White raised, most likely we would have been in EIR mode. And because you're essentially opening up all ag land as the potential for an asphalt plant. And while that wouldn't happen, it still is the scope and would have to be the what you have to
look
analyze.
at the entire picture.
Exactly. And so we just didn't want to do that at this point. If your commission feels strongly about his concerns and you want to direct us to look into other means of allowing for that, we could certainly consider that in some of our work programs. Perhaps comprehensive planning would take on something like that. I don't know, but for right now, I think what we're trying to do is address several issues and make several fixes in rapid succession.
It doesn't seem like it's a major problem now, and with the workload that we have, but maybe as a low priority item, something on the wish list of far away, you know. All right, since we don't have any impending problems there. All right, we'll bring it. Thank you very much for your testimony and all. We'll bring it back to the commission. Any comments, Commissioner Boyson?
Yes, thank you. And Mr. Apple and Mr. Anthony, I think Mr. White brings up some very good points. That, you know, with the conditional use permit, you probably ought to be able to do whatever on ag land, as long as it gets discretionary review and gets reviewed at the highest levels, et cetera, and is subject to any sort of appeals, that we should probably have allowed usages. But I really think this is something that the board needs to direct, not the Planning Commission. It's a budgetary item, and we don't have budgetary powers. So I would certainly support going forward with expanded industrial uses of agricultural land where we have precedents, which is, I think, where Mr. White is coming from. And but I really think that needs to come from the board rather than us.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Chair, just
Yes.
a comment on that. We are bringing the zoning ordinance reformatting project to the planning commissions, and one of the things that the commissions had requested and we promised to do was to give you a list of those substantive items that have come out of our review process, and I think this is a good candidate to be on that list, and I would presume the board will use that to make future decisions about the types of ordinance amendments that they want to pursue. So it won't be lost and will be documented.
All right, thank you. Any further comments? If not, the Planning Commission has completed its work for today. Oops.
You have to take
We
action.
have to. Oh, there is action.
You've almost completed your work.
All right, that's right, we have a recommendation to amend. I'm sorry.
Mr. Chair, just to summarize, we are asking that the commission authorize the chair to execute the resolution that recommends the amendments to Article 2s and Article 3 as laid out in Attachment 1. And included in that resolution are findings and acceptance of the negative declaration prepared for these amendments.
That's right. I failed to see the recommendation here. All right, Commissioner Boyson.
So, Mr. Chair, I would move that we follow the recommendations of staff as outlined here today with the amendments that have been made.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Brown. Any further discussion? I was anxious to go home. All right. If not, Ms. Valero, would you call the roll, please?
Commissioner
Ms.
Boyson.
Mendoza.
Commissioner Boyson.
Aye.
Commissioner Brown.
Aye.
Commissioner Cooney.
Aye.
Commissioner Valencia.
Aye.
Vote carries 4-0.
Thank you. And with that, the Planning Commission has completed its work for today. Thank you very much. This meeting is adjourned.